the North Pole, oceanographer and filmmaker Jacques Cousteau, and for pirate enthusiasts, Pirate Queen Grace O'Malley.
Please.
The events are free and open to the public at 7 p.m. on July 10th, 11th, and 12th. For more information, go to montgomerycollege.edu/Chautauqua. For County Report this week, I'm Stan Jones.
Coming up on County Report this week, the county is scratching out the cost of cat adoptions in July. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
What will Montgomery County look like in the year 2050? This is our chance to figure out what the future of the county can be and how it will grow so that every resident can have the opportunity to thrive. Montgomery County can be a place where we invest equitably in our communities to make them vibrant and safe for all ages and incomes to work, live, and play. Together we can set a vision for the infrastructure that connects our residents and creates a roadmap for a more sustainable, responsible, and prosperous county. Let's plan our future together.
Welcome back to County Report this week. I'm Anquinette Crosby. There was lots of food and music during a cookout hosted at Wheaton Regional Park that highlighted the Cameroonian culture. MyMC Media's Jordan Lindsay has the story.
Kissa, Kimbene, Kimbene, Kissa, Kimbene, Kimbene, Lassa, Lamoko, Lamoko, Lassa, Lamoko. Now, I'm giving them the greeting in the native language, mostly for the organization, for the community. When you say Kissa, you mean the voice of Banswa, we people of Banswa. Then they answer, the peace be with you.
The Bonsoir community of the United States hosted their very first cookout at Wheaton Regional Park.
This community began because of the wisdom of our chief in Bonsoir in Cameroon.
Bonsoir is located in the western region of Cameroon in Africa.
Bonsoir is a small village among the Ngemba community, big community in Cameroon. Those are the people who speak the same language. And we have the opportunity also to have that community here that they call Ngemba. And our language in there is Bonsoir.
We want to be well known because some through certain invitees we could connect to some of our members who are not yet aware of the existence of our association.
At cookouts, you get to eat and stuff, and you get to play games outside.
Whenever you have something joyful, we are together. Any difficulty situation, we are also together.
With lots of food, music, and fun activities for kids, as you can see, it was a good time.
I learned beans and the other language is Ba.
We are very proud because we were not even expecting this number.
Reporting in Silver Spring, Jordan Lindsay for County Report this week.
You can adopt a cat for free until the end of July. The county's Animal Services and Adoption Center are taking part in the Maryland 2000 campaign. That means all adoptions may take place at the Adoption Center or any participating shelter. You'll help save the lives of thousands of cats. We hope you consider coming out and adopting a new feline family member. To see what furry friends are available for adoption, go to montgomerycountymd.gov/ASD. With that, we close this edition of County Report This Week. Remember to like us on Facebook and to join us again at this time every week for a look at what's going on inside Montgomery County. I'm Anquinette Crosby. Thank you for watching.
morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to get started. This is our July 9th, 2019 legislative session. We will begin with an invocation by Rabbi Michael Safra from B'nai Israel Congregation. Please rise as you're able.
It's an honor for me to be able to offer this prayer to acknowledge shared values between our Jewish faith community, our nation, and our county. These are words of the 2nd century sage Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua. May it be your will, Lord our God, to cause to dwell in our midst love and companionship, peace and friendship. May you cause our borders to be filled with scholars. May you fill the totality of our days with hope, granting us the portion of paradise in the future world and confirming upon us good impulses in this world. May we rise early each morning to direct our hearts in awe of your name, and may it please you to grant the satisfaction of our most worthy desires. As you begin this meeting, may you find strength from Rabbi Elazar's prayer. O God, bless all those who sustain our most cherished values through their service. May they be guided by your Spirit, and may the blessing of service make them better able to experience all your blessings. Through their deliberations and actions, may they actualize the meaning of our biblical commandment. Proclaim liberty throughout the land to all the inhabitants thereof. Amen.
Thank you so much for that beautiful invocation. Now we have a presentation, a proclamation recognizing National Parks and Recreation Month by Council Members Friedson and Council Member Albornoz.
As our Parks and Recreation officials join us here, proud to be here as the Parks lead on the County Council, and also with my colleague Gabe Albornoz, who ably served as the leader of the Recreation Department. And these are two departments that are just such a critical part of what makes Montgomery County such a special place, and what makes our quality of life what it is in Montgomery County. And I'm proud to have worked with colleagues to fight to restore the $1.7 million in our budget to protect the 37,000 acres of parkland and the 422 parks that we have in our system, and to work with Councilmember Albornoz to make sure that our Recreation Department has the personnel and resources it needs to keep up with growing demand, and to make sure that our families have and our young people have and our seniors have what they need in order to fulfill their opportunities and to have great places to enjoy recreation. So, Gabe.
Thank you, Councilmember Friedson. What an honor to share this with you, and how strange it feels to be on this side of the aisle, because I was as part of this deliberation for the last 8 years of the 12 that I served. But I can speak in the first person about the incredible impact that our Parks and Recreation departments have here in Montgomery County. And we are a jewel among parks and recreation organizations across the entire country. And whenever there's a resident survey that articulates why residents come to Montgomery County, why they stay in Montgomery County, our parks and recreation amenities are always towards the top of the list. And our recreation department in particular helps keep our kids safe after school, helps serve vulnerable populations, and as Councilmember Friedson mentioned, significantly adds to the quality of life of all residents from every community. And so it is a thrill to acknowledge their important work today, and such an honor to be with all of you.
Director Riley, if you want to come up and say a couple words.
Thank you. I just want to say thanks to everybody, especially the council and county executive, for continuing to support the Recreation Department. We're proud to stand here with our sister agency Parks, and making Montgomery County just a great place to live, work, and play. I'm very proud of our team, who are out serving over 10,000 young people in summer camps this morning, and also helping connect seniors through social connections and meals and great programming. So thank you. We appreciate your support. Thank you.
We have the Chair of Park and Planning and the Director of the Parks Department, Director Riley. This is an easy one because we have Director Riley and Director Riley joining us today.
Yes, the other Director Riley. So I really need to thank the Council for recognizing the vital role that our Parks and Recreation Services play in making this Montgomery County such a great community and a great place to live, work, and play. This proclamation you're going to hear is absolutely wonderful, but more importantly, this council supports the parks every year through the budget process, and I need to thank them profusely for that, to both maintain the award-winning park system we already have, and then to continue to expand that system to provide opportunities for the changing needs of our growing population. I want to reiterate that the Parks and Recreation programs really support the Council's racial equity and social justice initiatives. Those Park and Recreation services have kind of been at the foundation of those initiatives for a decade. And if I could just tell a quick personal story, a couple Sundays ago I had a rare clear Sunday with nothing on my calendar, so I took my wife to brunch and then out to see some of the parks I always talk about that she never sees, and we went to Black Hill Regional Park in Boyd's and drove around the lake. And if you're familiar with that wonderful park, where the boat rental area is, you have a big, huge sloping lawn with a beautiful lake view, and we're not privileged to have many lake views in Montgomery County, and on that lawn was at least 300 to 400 families that had gathered to picnic, to enjoy each other's companies, to enjoy the view. They brought their picnic tables, their grills, and it appeared to reflect the current demographic of Montgomery County pretty closely. And two things I noted from that experience. One is that service was free, no entry fee, no parking fees, no fee to lay your blanket down on the lawn, the pesticide-free lawn, I might mention. And two, that is just one of so many free opportunities we provide in our parks for people to get out there and enjoy nature, recreate, and help meet their neighbors and build community, whether it's running on our trails, nature hikes, taking your dog to the dog park. There's just hundreds of things you can do to get outdoors and enjoy our park system that have no fee associated with it. So if you're new to the county, or if you're just not familiar with our park system, we have a great website, montgomeryparks.org. It has a things to do area in it where you can click through all these different wonderful opportunities that you can enjoy our parks. But I'll just wrap up saying thank you so much to the council for helping support the great system we have, and for partnering with us to expand it to meet the needs of the future. Thank you.
I'll note our Chairman Anderson has last year did a challenge to visit all of our parks in the entire park system, and my goal is to acquire and activate enough parks to keep that challenge going. And so personal challenge for us and for our colleagues. But Councilmember Albornoz and I will now read the proclamation. The County Council of Montgomery County, Maryland. Proclamation, whereas Montgomery Parks, which is part of the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, and Montgomery County Recreation programs are vitally important to establishing and maintaining the quality of life of our communities, ensuring the health of all residents, and contributing to the region's economic and environmental well-being. And
whereas Montgomery Parks, with more than 421 parks across nearly 37,000 acres, and Montgomery County Recreation, with 21 recreation centers across the county, contribute to our economic prosperity by increasing property values, expanding the local tax base, fostering tourism, and attracting and retaining businesses to our community. And whereas
Montgomery Parks and MCR play a vital role in supporting racial and social equity across the county by ensuring that all residents have access to spaces and opportunities to be physically, mentally, and emotionally healthy, experience nature, and bond with neighbors. And whereas
MNC PPC is the only 6-time gold medal winner of the National Recreation and Parks Association Award for Excellence, and one of 174 park or recreation entities accredited by the Commission of Accreditation of Park and Recreation Agencies. And whereas
in 2018, Montgomery Parks was awarded the Presidential Award of Excellence from the Maryland chapter of the American Society of Landscape Architects for the design of Greenbrier Local Park, and an honor award from the Potomac chapter of the American Society of Landscape Architects for the design of the Garden Gateway, Brookside Gardens entrance, and parking renovation. And whereas
Montgomery County Recreation received 8 National Association of Counties Awards in 2018 in recognition of innovative county government programs and the department received more awards in the Parks and Recreation category than any other county in the nation.
Now therefore be it resolved that the County Council of Montgomery County, Maryland hereby proclaims this month of July 2019 as National Parks and Recreation Month and encourages all community members to get out and enjoy our award-winning parks and recreation centers presented on this 9th day of July 2019 by myself and the Council President, Nancy Navarro.
Congratulations. So now we are on to general business. Are there any announcements, Ms. Lamarcy?
Nothing to add this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. So we also have distributed the minutes for June 11th, 13th, and 14th, as well as minutes for the closed sessions of June 11th and 14th. Are there any amendments or corrections? Hearing none, those are adopted. Now we're on to consent calendar. I need a motion.
So moved.
So by Councilmember Katz, second by Councilmember Rice. Let's see, we have Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you, Council President Nancy Navarro. I would like to just make some comments today about the CIP item that relates to the Council's important oversight work on the executive branch, particularly in the area of public safety. And I'd like to thank Council Member and Public Safety Committee Chair Sidney Katz for joining with me to introduce an important budget amendment on the Public Safety Radio Tower Network. The county's public safety radio tower network is decrepit and it needs to be replaced. And it failed catastrophically in March on Mother's Day weekend. Sorry, not March, May. And the county has been working for years to build a new public safety radio tower network. The radio towers are how the radios function. When a police officer or a firefighter pulls out their radio, it's talking to a tower nearby somewhere, and then that tower signals relayed through the other towers. And we need a state-of-the-art, first-rate, world-class public safety radio tower and public safety communications system. We don't have one today, but we're trying to build one. And building it requires 22 towers located in strategic places throughout the county, and each of these towers has a line of sight to a different tower. So every tower in the network is interdependent with every other tower. The whole network works when it is all in place as it was designed. The council has fully appropriated the funding for this tower network, and it is on the executive branch to implement what the council has appropriated. And when the county executive Leggett, former executive Leggett, left office, he stated that that network would be completed by the fall of 2020. So it seemed like everything was on track, but this winter we learned that the county executive Mark Elrich, was proposing to change or cancel 2 of the tower locations. One that is on the ICC, inside of the ICC intersection at Georgia Avenue, and another that is at the Bretton Woods community near Poolsville. And there was some nearby concern from neighbors about the sightliness or some unfounded accusations about health impacts about these towers, which led the county executive to recommend canceling those 2 locations. Unfortunately, the county executive did not do the work to figure out what the implications of canceling those 2 towers would be before the directive was issued to cancel the tower network, the 2 tower locations. And that has created some tremendous problems because it's not easy to build the 22 tower network and deliver it on time while you're trying to find alternative locations. What we know is that other locations would mean that in 2020 we do not have a fully functioning system. It is not this public safety standard of 95-95. Canceling these 2 towers could easily require 3 or 4 towers to replace them due to geography. It could require millions of dollars. One estimate is up to $5 million, all because a few residents around those towers complained. But what about, we ask, what about all the other residents who are relying upon the public safety system to function properly? These 2 locations, one near Olney and Leisure World, the other near the Potomac River, I just have to share, last night there was a Jeopardy question, and the question was, swift water rescue teams frequently visit the Great Falls area of this river between Reston and Bethesda. I tweeted back, what is the location of the 22nd tower in the public safety radio communications network?
Joanne?
Swift, unfortunately I wasn't on the show. I wouldn't have probably gotten anything else right on that show. But we are right now having a lot of swift water rescues and water rescues. You know, my kid goes to summer camp near that 22nd tower location. I want to know if he's out kayaking, fire and rescue can get there and do the job to take care of kids who are on the Potomac River or kayakers. These are life safety issues. So the capital budget amendment that we're introducing today would remove the discretion about the locations and say we are going to proceed with the locations that we have designed, and the goal is to deliver a 95, that's the public safety standard, by fall of 2020. Now, Councilmember Katz and I sent a letter to the executive on April 3rd asking for more information about the decision to relocate those towers. We never heard a response. The entire county council sent a letter on June 21st. We have never heard a response. In press reports, the executive branch has said no comment, time and time again. We have not seen a credible alternative to the 22 tower network that has already been designed. So that is why we have to act now. The good news is that the state of Maryland, with the leadership from Governor Hogan, has made a separate decision that they are going to proceed with the 21st tower location at the ICC intersection. And they've offered the county once again to co-locate the communications network facility on that tower. And I understand the executive branch is now saying that they will proceed with that co-location after having previously rejected that tower. So hopefully we are closer to a solution there, and we need to finally resolve the Bretton Woods location. But this capital budget amendment will specify what that location is, as well as the other 21 towers, and enable us to move on and get this network built on the timeline that the council has insisted upon in its letters to the executive. Now, if the executive could figure out a better solution and wants to send us an amendment to this capital budget item, that is always an option. But those of us who have studied this are not optimistic that there is any alternative, which is why we've been so insistent that we move forward with the plan that we've already funded and already designed. So I want to thank my council members, colleagues, for joining in this effort to hold the executive branch accountable to deliver the network that we funded and designed and to get this job done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Remer. Councilmember Rice.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I wanted to highlight two items. The first being item G, which is our CIP appropriation for MCPS for our school security systems. This is incredibly important, and many of our parents and our general community know that we're continuing to ensure the safety of all of our children. These are for some of those security vestibules at many of our schools that still don't have them, and so really over this summer you'll see a lot of this work being accelerated, and we should be able to get to all of the schools. And I really want to thank our state delegation for their work in making sure that this happens to ensure the safety of our children. And then with item H, I really wanted to thank our Board of Public Works, actually, our comptroller, Peter Francho, as well as Treasurer Nancy Kopp and the Governor, for all coming together to realize and understand how important this Tacoma Park Silver Spring Math and Science building will be for Montgomery College. It truly is something we heard from the community. We heard from the students who go to Montgomery College, Tacoma Park, about how important this building is, as well as, of course, the administrators and leadership at Montgomery College. And so it's great to see this coming to fruition. We know this is going to mean, again, a heavy investment in education, something that we pride ourselves, not just here at the county, but at the state at doing. And so I really just wanted to highlight those two items, again, working together to make sure that we're ensuring safety and security, as well as a positive educational future for folks in our community. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hooker.
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to call my colleagues' attention to item O. I'm very happy that we're making so much progress on the Silver Spring Library site. As everybody knows, I think we have a child care crisis and a housing crisis at the same time. And to get a nationally recognized, high-quality, bilingual child care center like Centronia to serve up to 150 children at that site, and 75% of which will be farms eligible, and to be doing it in downtown Silver Spring, where our families are routinely waiting 3 and 4 years on waiting lists to access high-quality child care. And to get dozens of new housing units in White Oak at the same time as part of the bargain, I believe is a big win for the community and for the county. We've really come a long way on this project, and I'm grateful to Centronia. Myrna Peralta is here, who I've known for very many years, and grateful to the Godelski Center. Jonathan Jen is here as well. The center is investing at least $22 million in this project for the benefit of the whole community. The Silver Spring Historic Society and some of the advocates, Marcy and George, are here, who have been tirelessly advocating for this for a long time, and I'm certainly grateful to the current and former county executives and to DGS and Mr. Hassan for all their work getting us to this point. But I'm excited about this great contribution to downtown Silver Spring, and looking forward to the next chapter.
And I want to thank my colleagues on the GO committee, Councilmember Friedson, as well as Vice President Katz, for the work to get us to this point. Obviously, as everybody probably, I don't know if you know, but we do have a property disposition law, and this comes before our committee in order to do our due diligence and make sure that if we are going to dispose of public property, that is in the best interest of our public. And this particular proposal is very exciting, especially in light of the Early Care and Education Initiative that seeks to expand the availability of child care slots by 600 by the end of this fiscal year. So next year by July. That's a very ambitious goal, and I think this at least begins to get us towards that goal and even expand even further. And as it was stated, also the issue of senior housing is really important. So, it seems like it's been going on for a while, at least back and forth conversations, but that's important because that's part of the deliberative process that we engage in with the public. And I think, as Councilmember Hucker, District Representative, stated, this really is a win-win, and so I'm very excited about this as well. Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much, Council President. I did want to, and I don't want to belabor it, but here I am belaboring it. I did want to talk about the item that Councilmember Reamer discussed. The concern about these towers has been obviously a great concern in many, many ways. The process was part of the concern. The state did not do a good job on informing the public, especially in the Olney area. And what happened was they were supposed to have a meeting and it snowed, and so therefore that meeting got canceled, and it never happened again. So that's when the county executive decided that there should be a stepping back, and that we needed to change the process. The Public Safety Committee did have an extensive, and with government operations, I serve on both, so therefore an extensive meeting about this. We discussed it in many, many ways. Councilmember Reamer joined us. And I want to be clear on what we're doing today. This item is on the agenda as an introduction to go to public hearing. This is not something that's being decided today. If the public has other discussions, if the county executive can come in with another solution that quickly, then that's fine. And this is going to go to public hearing on July 30th. But this is the process that we have thought would be the best process to get us moving forward. It is a great concern. What we have learned is that the system that we have now, and Hans has mentioned, we had a failing system on Mother's Day weekend. It's a great concern. But I want to be clear that my colleagues and I have, and the county executive have allocated the money and worked on correcting the system that we now have, so that it's safe while we get to December 2020, when this new system is supposed to be available. It was a timing issue. We spent the money to make certain that got corrected, and so hopefully we won't have other problems. But it's an old system. The parts aren't available. We have to go on eBay or other places to get these. But we'll do what is necessary to keep the system that we have today working until we can get to the December 2020 system. What the county executive had suggested is that we would go to a 20 tower system and then work on the last 2 towers. Well, during our discussions and after our discussions, we realized that even if we went to the 20 tower system, it would be a better system than what we have today, which is true. The standard, the industry standard is 95-95. 95% of the time that we'd have 95% of the coverage inside buildings and other places. But with the 20 system, it would be around 92%, we would still have to have a reconfiguration of the software because it's how they talk to each other. And so there would be an additional expense with that. We'd still have to work on the last 2 poles, regardless of where they are. And, of course, the governor in the census said that he was going to put up the 1 tower anyhow. And so we are working through this. The concern that all of us have is that the public remains safe, that our first responders remain safe. When a firefighter is inside a building on fire, we need to make certain that they can communicate properly so that safety is of utmost concern. And that is what we're after. We are going to work with everybody to get us there. We're going to work with the state as well. But this is a very, very necessary thing that we're doing. And we believe by working together, we're going to have the safest situation we can possibly have for Montgomery County. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice President Katz. As chair of the Public Safety Committee, I know that you've been following and working on this very closely. And we've been discussing this for quite a while also as joint committees because the money is there. But it is, it is a very difficult process to make sure that all voices in the community are heard. But the bottom line is that we have to act in the best interest of all of our residents. And we have letters from our first responders saying that they're very concerned. So, I appreciate the introduction of this particular, item, and I know the executive also is very obviously interested in making sure we resolve this as soon as possible. So I look forward to that. Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment on item K, and I wanted to express appreciation to my colleagues and also recognize Councilmember Albornoz for his work over the years creating the Kid Museum. It's one of our most exciting initiatives in the STEM arena to get young people prepared for the jobs of the future, to strengthen our workforce in the county, make it more attractive for technology employers. And this is just a designation that will allow funding that the council added in the budget this year to be provided as a grant to the Kid Museum, which I am very enthusiastic about. So thank you very much.
Very good. Okay, all those in favor of adopting the consent calendar, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Thank you so much. All right, so now we're going to move on to item number 3. This is our district council session. This is our second work session on the zoning text amendment ZTA 19-01, accessory residential uses, accessory apartments. I just want to mention that the final vote would be on July 23rd. And so what we want to do today is obviously wrap up the discussion, also entertain any amendments council members want to introduce and take votes on those so that we can just be ready for final action on the 23rd. I also want to remind everybody that there will also be, well, 2 bills. There's an Omnibus Bill that will accompany this ZTA, and that is to make additional changes to county code that cannot be accommodated through the ZTA. And Councilmember Friedson also has another bill that basically does, the same thing, but on a very specific issue. I want to just share that for the Omnibus Bill, one of the things that I will be recommending, and I know Councilmember Reamer, we've had conversations, is to make sure that when it comes to the ADUs, that we follow a practice that was started and was already codified, which is to utilize what is termed a community action team approach, and that has to do with enforcement, with code enforcement. Many times there are issues in a community that require somebody coming out to look at issues around parking, or somebody coming out to look at issues of just, code for building and things of that nature. And it's very frustrating for residents because they have to make different calls and they have to wait for different schedules. We've created a community action team that is comprised of a combination of representatives from different departments, the police department, or perhaps, permitting services. They come in together and they assess and respond to a situation. So that way you can address these issues in a more timely fashion and right away and stabilize it. So this is an approach that I think will be very important to incorporate into the ADUs item, and that will be included in that omnibus bill that will come forward as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Councilmember Reamer, who's the chair of the Fed Committee, to kind of get us going. And as I said, I know that there will be amendments. I know Councilmember Albornoz has amendments, et cetera, and we'll work through those to this session. Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you very much, Council President Nancy Navarro. So turning to the first page of the memorandum, not the cover page, the first page of the memorandum, there's written there, it says proposed agenda for the July 9th work session. For those here in the room, there may be extra copies of the packet in the back of the room. So the proposed agenda for today is to review those items that we did discuss, that were not, so to review items listed in the memo from the June 18th work session that were not yet discussed. And then we will consider motions that were made, and then review issues from that session where there was a request for additional information, just for whether to inform votes or to just be helpful information for discussion purposes. And our staff attorney, Jeff Zients, is not able to be here today. He's been grappling with some health challenges, and our thoughts are with him. He is doing a terrific job fighting for his health, and he has been there with us on this one every step of the way. Pam Dunn will take over fully on the staff side, and of course we have the planning staff and Department of Housing Community Affairs and Park and Planning and DHCA and the executive branch and council staff. So Pam, should we start with top of page 2, item number 1?
Thank you. Good morning. Yeah, I think that's perfect. I will walk you through the packet in the order in which it's presented. As Councilmember Reamer just mentioned, we do have just a handful of issues that were not covered during the last work session. They had been in the previous report. And the first one of those is, should an accessory structure built before May 31st, 2012 be used as an ADU without regard to setback? And the planning board recommended their only change to this recommendation was that we add the word legally, which of course council staff agrees with. Anything that was legally constructed prior to this time.
So Pam, can I just pause you? So
Sure.
this is referring to properties that may have a garage on the property that was built
Correct.
in the past, or I know in my neighborhoods there's some small structures that may have been built as studio offices, in the past. So this would allow existing structures that built before a certain date.
Right. Over time, during the process of revising the zoning code, there have been changes to the setback requirements for accessory structures. So you could have an accessory structure that exists today, maybe a one-car garage in very old neighborhoods, and that setback for that garage may be less than what would be required today if a new detached garage or accessory structure were built.
Right.
And so what this would allow is if you have an existing structure sitting there, rather than having to tear it down, move it, or not make use of that existing structure, in this case, if it was legally constructed at the time it was built, it could be transformed into an accessory dwelling unit. There are a couple provisions. One is you do not increase the height, or you do not increase the size of the structure, meaning you really are using the existing structure as it exists, and that you don't create windows on the side facing a neighboring yard. So those protections.
Right. Okay.
I did speak to DPS this morning. There was a concern. We can cover it during the editorial piece, but given we're talking about these existing structures, the language in the text amendment says without regard to setback, but we would also add without regard to the floor area as well, because we do have another place in the ZTA where we really do talk about limiting the size of accessory dwelling units. So it's the council's decision. Do you want to restrict how much of that existing structure can be used, or, as we are already saying, we want to allow them to use it without regard to the setback? Can they use the same existing structure to its full extent for the accessory dwelling unit? And to make that clear for DPS when they're evaluating these, we would just add the phrase after setbacks. It's on, I think, line 162 of the ZTA, to say or floor area, without regard to the setbacks or the floor area of that
Okay, so
existing
to
structure.
again restate for the rest of us, the intent here was to allow existing structures to be converted to an ADU. However, the council is putting in some pretty significant restrictions on the size of those units if they are newly constructed.
Correct.
And it could be that there's an existing garage on a property at the lot line that, could be converted, but it might be 600 square feet and on a 5,500 square foot lot. And under the council's ZTA, that would be too big because it's 10% of the lot size, and so the limit would be 550 square feet.
Correct.
So if you were trying to convert that, you would have to build a false wall or something like that inside of the structure to artificially reduce the size of that existing garage so that the habitable space is matches the size limitation.
Right.
And that was not our intent. Our thought here, certainly speaking for myself, but I think I speak for others, but again, speak for myself, the idea was if there's an existing structure, the impact of that structure is existing. And whether it's visual or what, it's there. And it would just not make sense to say that it's okay to have a structure as long as you don't use it for people. You can use that for a car, but you can't use that for people. It just doesn't seem consistent with our goals and values around housing and taking care of people. So we just wanted to make sure that the additional size restrictions would not become an impediment to converting an existing ADU, which is frankly where I think there is more opportunity as far as the backyard cottage or the garage conversion to carriage house. I speculate you're likely to get a lot more existing structures converted than new structures constructed. All right, Councilmember.
Yeah, I just wanted a point of clarification just to make sure. One, I think this is consistent with what we did with basements. In the idea that an existing structure, is not what we're most concerned about when it comes to size. It is additional structures, which is a change and has an impact on neighbors. And so I think this is consistent with that and consistent with the work that we've done thus far in making tightening up this ZTA as we went through this extensive process. But as part a later decision point that we're making, we are clarifying the language related to footprint.
We are.
And so I just want to make sure that the language that we change for this is consistent with not the current language that was in it, but what we expect the amended language to be with respect to the footprint size of the accessory structure, not the, the square footage. Does that make, it's a point of clarification, but I don't want to change this now to reflect what currently happens, and then we're expecting to make a change in a few decision points, and then we now have created confusion in different language for something.
I don't think they're in conflict. I think by stating that the setbacks and the size of the accessory structure as they exist are appropriate and without regard to the other parts of the text amendment are kind of what we're achieving right this minute. We'll modify the other language with respect to how do we really want to define the largest size of a new one, and they'll be compatible.
Great. I just want to make sure that the references and the language and the way that we talked about it, because we created a little bit of confusion last time that we're now cleaning up, and I don't want to recreate that confusion. So appreciate the clarification.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think we need a motion on this item. All right.
Moved by Councilmember Friedson.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Reamer.
Did we take that without objection?
Yeah, I don't see any lights. Is there any objection to this item? Okay, so passes.
Thank you, Council President. All right, so that addresses
the first issue that we're covering today. The second one is on page 2 at the top. It said, should the setback increase for buildings longer than 24 feet be changed for ADUs? Currently, in the zoning code, if you have an accessory structure that you want to build in your backyard, and you have, there's a length of that accessory structure that is longer than 24 feet, then you have to increase the setbacks for that structure to be built. During committee, a piece was added to ZTA 1901 that would allow an accessory structure for an accessory dwelling unit to be as large as 32 feet before that increase in setback occurred, recognizing that we do have modular structures that get built and that those sometimes come in 32-foot long lengths.
Pam, that's on bottom of page 2, right? You said top. So we're on item 2 at the bottom of page 2?
Oh, that's at the top. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the wrong thing. Yep, you're right. Sorry about that.
Okay, just...
Okay.
Okay.
So I just wanted to say this one, council staff in our conversation suggested that there's a movement around shipping containers and converting them to housing. And I know the county executive has expressed interest in shipping containers being converted to housing. In fact, the chief administrative officer, when I met with him early in the beginning of the term, said, I hope you're ready for shipping container housing, because that's what we're working on. So I was intrigued by that. I thought, okay, can't wait to see it. And so we wanted to make sure that that was allowed in this zoning change. Unfortunately, subsequently, this was referred to by the county executive and others as essentially allowing trailers, which is an incendiary term that is wildly misinterpreted by many people and led to all kinds of confusion and negative commentary about this initiative. So I think I'm frustrated by that experience. I think it was a good faith effort here to allow for a different type of structure, but it has not been well received. So I'll just say that as a preface.
Okay. Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you, Madam President. Want to begin by just acknowledging and appreciating the thoughtful conversations we had in our first work session and the individual conversations I've had with my colleagues. It's just further evidence how much I enjoy serving with all of you and trying to find a reasonable spot as we discuss all bills, but for myself in particular this one. I remain concerned most significantly about the detached units, and so most of my amendments, proposed amendments, revolve around those detached units. And with regards to modular units, I do believe 32 feet is fairly large.
in terms of the size and scope, particularly in our 60 and our 90 zones. And so I do believe that warrants the provision of additional setbacks to ensure that there is more of a buffer between adjacent properties. And so I would like to move that for detached ADUs longer than 24 feet, that there should be a setback of an additional foot for every foot above those 24 feet to ensure, again, a further buffer between adjacent properties.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Albornoz. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Councilmember Katz. All right, so we have this motion, this amendment on the floor. Let me turn to Councilmember Friedson, and then we can see who else has any thoughts on this one.
Thank you, Council President. I apologize for interrupting. Just speaking to this particular issue, I think there has been a lot of misunderstanding with this. Originally, I set out in this goal to make sure that we, as we were looking at the bill introduced by my colleague, that the way that I viewed it was not to have additional significant setback and height burdens and requirements that we wouldn't impose upon a large addition or a large knockdown, in the interest of fairness and the interest of dealing with zoning and housing in an equitable and reasonable way. This was the one example that I was convinced, in the interest of a cheaper way to do it, to back off from what the existing setback and height requirements are. Other than that, we have maintained all of the existing ones. I was torn on it, quite candidly, because of the interest of a more affordable option that was less than $100,000 or $150,000, and so I did go along with it. But I was, and always have maintained, a little bit of concern that we were backing off of that one commitment that we had stuck to on every other decision point that we had made, and so I'm happy to support it. We've heard a lot of concern. I agree with Councilmember Reamer that this is one of the areas that has led to the greatest amount, I think, of misinformation and uncertainty of what this proposed change would mean. And so I think that this is a thoughtful way to hopefully alleviate some of those concerns. So I'm happy to support it and thank Councilmember Albornoz for putting it forward.
Thank you. Councilmember Rice.
Thank you. For those that are not on the FED committee and haven't had the benefit of having this discussion prior, can I hear from planning as to what your thoughts would be when it comes to the amendment?
Well, I think that Councilmember Friedson has really framed this issue quite well. I think it is important to maintain this principle that if you're going to require a certain setback or lot coverage or height requirement of an accessory structure in combination with the existing house, it seems appropriate in principle to apply the same standard to tear downs or additions. On the other hand, the perfect is the enemy of the good. If it makes people feel that they have some more assurance that these accessory structures are not going to be disruptive to their neighborhood or do violence to the way that they expect their neighborhoods to be developed, then I really wouldn't be so hung up on the principle of the thing as to say that this is going to interfere with the objectives of this ZTA. So I think that the short answer is, do I love it? No. I do think the principle is important, but I think this is a reasonable accommodation.
Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much, Council President. I guess because these are Euclidean zones, this is as close as we can come to being compatible, having compatibility in the zone. I know if it's a floating zone that it has compatibility as part of the process, but in a Euclidean zone you really don't have that as such. That's always been my understanding. And I guess this is the only way we could really say that, as best we can, that if an accessory structure is a detached accessory structure is going to be built, that this would be the only way we could really say that it needs to be as compatible as we could do. Is that a fair statement?
I think the for more clarity, it's really about the fact that these don't have a review other than going for building permits. So
Right.
it's really about, having very objective standards that create that compatibility is what you're trying to achieve with this. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, I don't see any more lights. Is there any objection to this amendment? Hearing none, then we will adopt that. Okay.
Thank you. All right. So we'll move to the next item, which is, I think we can dispose of this one quickly. It was originally as introduced. Well, Pam, why don't you just go ahead and describe it?
So number 3 is with respect to should a separate entrance for an attached ADU be on any side of the dwelling. And the current code allows a separate front entrance if the entrance existed before certain standards were in place. ZTA 1901 would delete that provision and require a separate entrance on any side of the dwelling. The committee has recommended retaining the existing requirement that prohibits a new front door for a new ADU. Really to
Thank you, Pam. So this is basically means you can't have a second front door. I'll state that as introduced, this amendment was much closer to a provision allowing for duplexes to be constructed. And we concluded in the process of public dialogue that we ought to focus here on accessory dwelling units, because that's what we're proposing. And it shouldn't be a confusing question of, is this really a duplex provision? And I heard that from folks in the community, and I agreed that the right way to do this was to just focus on what we're trying to achieve here. And an accessory dwelling unit should be accessory to the primary dwelling unit, and the location of the front door is part of that signification.
Okay.
And so this would not allow you to build a second front door on the front of the house.
All right, Councilmember Katz, are you asking? Okay, Councilmember Katz.
Thank you. I agree with this, but I have to also tell you, I live in a neighborhood where there's duplexes. I mean, I live in a single-family home, but there's duplexes, and they do have a separate entrance, and you drive past it, and you can not tell what is, which one is single-family and what is duplex. So I have no problem with this standard, but I also have no problem with duplexes the way that it's set up in my neighborhood.
I don't have problems with duplexes either.
Yeah, I would like to applaud you for that.
All right, so I don't see any lights. Is there any objection to this recommendation? Hearing none, we will adopt it. Okay.
All right. Now, the next one will seem a little confusing because we are simultaneously expressing our support for something while we are acting to clean up the code and remove it from the zoning code in anticipation of its being retained in the legal code, right? It is actually a requirement of the license. Pam, is that?
It is already a requirement.
It's already a
of the license.
requirement of the license,
Right.
all right? So the specific act we will take is to remove it from the zoning code, but we are doing that because it is a requirement of the license, and we strongly support that. Okay, so just as a background, so this is the question of owner occupancy.
Correct.
And I would just like to state that the town of Brookville has had an ADU provision for many years. The town of Brookville is an historic town. It's beautiful, old buildings. In fact, one of the structures there was the White House for a day when James Monroe was fleeing a burning Washington. He took up residence there in a beautiful house that you can get an invitation to if you know Sandy Heiler. And they have a ADU provision, and they testified in support and said that the key for them was owner occupancy, because owner occupancy ensures that whoever, that the accessory dwelling unit, however it is experienced, is one that the owner of the home is comfortable living near. And the owner occupancy, I think, is what drives questions about, for example, will you have more than one family living on a property? I think the answer is likely not, because most of us who have a family know that it's all you can do to have in proximity to your own children, and let alone having someone else's children nearby on the same property would be quite a lot. So it's an organic limitation on how accessory dwelling units are used and the accountability of the property owner. There's no absentee landlord. There's nobody renting out multiple units and then, checking out. Someone's there, someone's accountable. Neighbors have a relationship with a person who is there as the homeowner under all circumstances. So specifically, we are expressing our strong support in this provision for owner occupancy, but recognizing at the request of council staff to clean up the zoning code. That's all this really is an accommodation to council staff to locate things where they feel that it's more appropriate to locate them, it remains as a provision of the license while not being a provision of the zoning code.
Okay. Councilman Albornoz.
So I appreciate the change and the clarification. This is a very important point, one that I better understood after our first work session, and I think does alleviate a number of the concerns I, and I'm sure all of you have heard as well from the community. But we do have to acknowledge that there are numerous situations currently in which people are not securing licenses to move forward with the building and development of ADUs. And so I did also want to acknowledge that thanks to this council, we have added staff members to code enforcement and housing to better ensure that when those instances do occur, that we address those in real time and as quickly as possible, and have put our housing department in a better position to be able to address those issues. So for those folks watching and in the audience, just please know that we are aggressively, we've heard you, and we are moving in the directive of ensuring. I did have a question for housing, because this did come up in a previous work session, and one of the suggestions that I had made was that we look at visiting potential locations not during 9 to 5 hours, but on evenings and weekends, when people are more likely to be home and when you are more likely to observe and see when somebody is not in fact following the provision of the policy or the law. Has there been any deliberation or discussion with regards to the feasibility of some shift changes, particularly with some of the new positions coming in and adding those hours?
Thank you, Councilmember Albornoz. Yes, we have had conversations internally at DHCA, and we have had conversations with the Office of Human Resources and are looking to engage the union. It is a union question in terms of changing the shifts and being able to better utilize staff to make sure that we're able to be out in the neighborhoods at the proper times.
I'll just note we did this in recreation, and yes, there is a provision that you have to give 40 days notice to existing staff members if you adjust their schedules, but given the vacancies, you can preset those schedules in advance, and that still is well within the framework of the labor negotiated contract. And so for those emerging vacancies, I'd encourage you to consider establishing those times for those new positions.
Thank you. I appreciate the suggestion.
And I want to reemphasize what I said earlier, that part of the Omnibus Bill will be to include also the approach of the community action teams, so that way you don't have a lot of frustration in terms of having to rely on different schedules and different agencies or departments coming in, that you go straight through there. So I think that will also be a good issue that will ensure that the neighbors are on top of, and that the community maintains that quality of life as well. Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to quickly clarify, related to both the companion bill and the owner occupancy issue, just for those who weren't part of the extensive Fed work sessions, there is a slight change to the owner occupancy. My understanding, I just want a clarification from staff. The existing law requires that you live in the principal residence and that you can rent out an accessory structure within our existing ADU law that has been on the books, currently is on the books. What this change would allow is that you could live either in the accessory structure or in the principal residence, which reflects what the goals have been set forth by the bill sponsor. I just want to make that wasn't how it has always been framed, and I just want to make sure everybody understands that we couldn't do that in the ZTA. And so it was deleted from the ZTA. It is part of the accompanying bill, as mentioned by the council president. But I think it's important to note there is a slight difference to what is going to be allowed and what is currently allowed. But it is merely, there is an owner occupancy on the property, but it could be either in the accessory structure or in the principal structure.
Yeah, that's correct. I think that was an inadvertent way in which it was drafted in the bill the original time. I don't think it was ever the intent that the council had, that someone had to live only in the principal dwelling. So yes, that change will be made when the bill comes forward. Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, so I guess without objection.
Yeah, I mean,
we're just going to clarify that.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Pam,
next
that
item.
is as introduced. There's no motion required, right? But it is without objection because we're going through
We're
each
going to
point.
go through it, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. Next item is regarding municipalities.
Correct.
So, Pam?
Should the changes for the zoning for ADUs affect municipalities? We know that we do have municipalities within the county that have their own zoning authority and are not affected by changes to the zoning code. Those that are affected by county zoning, they can add certain things. This is in the packet that modify that zoning in a more restrictive fashion, but they cannot be more liberal about that. So within the scope of what we're doing here, I think we're pretty much in agreement with most of those other municipalities in which we have zoning authority. Tacoma Park did want some liberalization of building permits and setbacks, but again, because that's more liberal than where this is headed, that won't occur, although we did, as you recall, recognize their desire for the parking exemption within the city, and so that's being done.
So what they would like to be able to do is continue to manage parking in the city according to their own parking permit policies and standards, and they'll handle all of that issue within the boundary of the city. That's what they've requested.
And they basically did not want to increase the parking requirement within the
Right.
city
They didn't want it to make it more restrictive.
and create more driveways, correct?
So we agreed
Yeah.
on the basis
Yeah.
of them seeking a more liberal standard.
Councilmember Katz.
Thank you. So if a municipality wanted to have a more liberal standard or less different standard, then would they do it on their own, or do they have to come back to the county in order to change that?
If we have zoning authority over that municipality, they would have to request the council modify the zoning code to make it more liberal.
And,
Yeah.
and then we would go through a public hearing
And the
and
same
everything,
ZTA
just like we
process.
were doing for this.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. So,
Okay.
objection?
So, yeah, I think, that objection? Great. So this allows a more liberal standard in Tacoma Park, which we appreciate the role of the city in their helpful advocacy on this issue. It really has made a big difference.
all right.
All right. We heard a second on the yes, we do for Tacoma Park from the district council member, who I know has been following this closely. Next, we have an editorial change.
We have, it's just a few editorial changes here. We were contacted by Mr. Grossman from the Office of Zoning and Administrative Hearings, and it's just a little bit of clarification about the requirement for parking. You can see it on page 5 of the staff report. It's really just adding the phrase, a total of at least 2, to the description of how parking would be added for the accessory unit. This is when you are not under those areas exempt from the additional space. It really is just clarification. He also made the recommendation, which I know that the council is already in agreement with, that if the effective date of ZTA 1901 should be concurrent with any effective date of bill changes to the code to Chapter 29. And then following that, there was also some confusion by just the insertion of the word only to part of the text regarding the maximum footprint of the accessory dwelling.
Well, I think we need a motion on the editorial change.
Slow down.
So,
First, Councilmember Friedson, I think, has his line up.
I just want a clarification on that, too. So the way that the effective date of, this is, by the way, this is specifically referring to the companion Omnibus Bill that the Council President referenced and that I mentioned previously, that addresses the issues accompanying this zoning text amendment that are not zoning text changes but have to be changed in order for this to occur. There were significant concerns raised by community members about moving forward with one without the other, and we had a discussion on this, and now I think that there is some agreement among council members, although this is the discussion point we're having now, on tying any legislative change to the zoning text amendment so that we're not rushing one before the other, and in the interest of being thorough and deliberate and doing them together. So that's what this is, just to make sure everybody understands what we're talking about. And then my only question here is the language should coincide with the effective date of any bill changing County Code Section 2926. Do we have to set a defined timeline there, or is that,
When,
it seems open-ended to me.
When the ZTA comes back for action, there will be an effective date on the action for the ZTA, which at that point I think that the council will have more information on the timing of the Omnibus Bill itself, and there will be an effective date, but it could be determined that that's possibly
Terrific.
later this year. And
So
they
this
would
is the
sync
spirit
together.
that we're agreeing to, and then you're going to take
Right.
care of the letter later.
Correct.
I wanted to clarify that because, and make sure everybody understands that that's what we're doing, and I appreciate the clarification. And I would move this if it needs to be moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Hucker.
Reamer.
Reamer. All right. Any further discussions? Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Council President. I just wanted to mention that I think this is the right thing to do to tie these two trains together, and I'm glad it's a clarifying amendment. We talked about often in the Fed Committee that there were a number of things we probably referenced over 10 times when we had the companion legislation, and that was because we understood that there needed to be things corrected there so that we could be consistent. So just want to thank my colleagues, everybody up here, particularly the Fed Committee, for realizing that and tying these two together. I think it sends a clear message to the public that we understand these things need to happen at the same time. So thank you.
Great. So without objection? Okay.
All right.
That's adopted.
Okay, so that takes care of some of the, I think, more minor pieces that we hadn't had a chance to get to in our last session. Now we're on the bottom of page 5, going to return to a few issues. There may be some additional motions that are made and some other topics. So there, some of the more big picture topics. I'll just start here. The first one relates to the maximum size. As initially proposed, it was a 1,200-foot cap of the maximum size. Upon reflection, sorry,
Yeah, I'm
Council
sorry.
President.
So just want to clarify, so on page 5, the vote that we just took without objection, just want to clarify that that included all the items, 1, 2, because they were in terms of the editorial changes, right?
Correct.
Did we-
The first one,
Yeah,
was just the clarifying language from Mr. Grossman. The second was that the bill would be
One side.
consistent. And the third was just removing another word from the code that we felt was confusing. So.
Okay. All right, just want to clarify that my colleagues are okay, that was all, that's what we just
All-inclusive.
adopted. Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. So instead of a maximum size of 1,200 square feet, the committee has recommended a 3-part test for the maximum size. The first is 10% of the lot size. The second is 50% of the footprint of the structure. And the third is, under all circumstances, 1,200 square feet, which, of course, you'd have to have a 12,000-foot lot to be able to get to that size. There was some confusion about whether we had said gross floor area or intended gross floor area or footprint. I know the committee intended to make it footprint rather than gross floor area. And so we were just clarifying, the committee wanted to clarify, and I believe we need a motion.
Moved by Councilmember Friedson. Second by Councilmember Jawando.
All right.
Okay. All right, so let's see, Councilmember Albornoz, you have comment about this item?
Sorry, I had a point about the second point. I have no objection to that
Okay.
particular amendment.
So without objection, we will adopt that from the committee. Great, okay.
All right, so I think the packet says that there may be a motion to limit the maximum size of the detached structure.
All right, Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you, Madam President. And Mr. Chair, I appreciate the thoughtful manner in which, again, the Fed Committee proposed a staggered approach that I do think is reasonable in terms of ensuring that the detached unit is proportionate to both the scale of the lot and the size of the home where it would be built adjacent to. But I am concerned that 1,200 square feet, although, again, acknowledging on a larger lot, is still a formidable structure, and I think has the possibility of potentially overwhelming the size and scope of a property. And so That's why I felt uncomfortable with the 1,200-foot cap and feel more comfortable with an 800-square-foot cap. Still following the staggered approach for the smaller properties below 800 feet, but capping it at 800. And so I do propose an amendment to cap, continue with the staggered approach, but cap it rather than at 1,200 feet at 800 square feet.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Councilmember Katz, a second. All right, let's have discussion. Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you. I thought about this one a lot, and what I would say is that 800 square feet is basically a roomy one-bedroom or a really, really small two-bedroom, and there's no more than that. And I think the vision here is that a retired couple could live comfortably in the unit and rent the house out. We hear from a lot of retirees about their ambition to live in that kind of arrangement. And I'm just concerned that 800 feet really puts a crimp in that kind of plan. So I think where the lot size is larger, where the primary structure is larger, a larger structure could be accommodated. And I would leave it as the committee had recommended.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you for that. I just want to make sure that we clarify, and I appreciate very much, and we've had extensive conversations about this particular issue because the size of the units, in addition to parking, were two of the major concerns that were raised, and I think are legitimate concerns. And, the interest of the proposal that the committee adopted, which is a very stringent three-part test, is to ensure that it is an accessory structure. That is the purpose of this. It is not to create two similarly sized structures on a lot. Is to create an accessory structure, the opportunity to have an accessory structure on a lot. I think that we came to a really thoughtful compromise in addressing the legitimate concerns, particularly in small lots. And I think that the way in which we arrived at it accomplishes, rather than focusing on a set square footage, which we had talked about and was part of that conversation, we arrived as we did because we recognized that each lot varies in size quite substantially. An R60 lot can be, we have some 5,000, even below what the current standard is, 6,000 square foot. We have some 5,000 square foot R60 lots. Those would only be allowed to have a 500 square foot accessory structure in them because they'd be capped at 10%. Many of those have extremely small principal residences, and so the 500 would have to be less than the principal structure. So it'd have to be more than 1,000 square foot structure. So I appreciate and totally understand the idea of wanting to make sure that in small lots that these are appropriate sized accessory structures. I think that the three-part test, 50% of the principal structure, which ensures that it's accessory and not similarly sized, and 10% of the total lot coverage, which also includes the 35% total lot coverage of both. And so we have, in what the committee had arrived at, an extremely stringent and I think appropriate standard to make sure that we meet the goals of the legislation while also allowing for appropriately sized accessory structures to occur. And so I respect the reason for this. I don't think that it's necessary, and I think that the approach that the committee took is the thoughtful one and reasonable one. And in most cases, it will result in 800 square foot and smaller structures anyway because of the three-part test that we have put in place based on what the committee approved.
Councilmember Jawanda.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you to Councilmember Friedson. I think you said much of what I was going to say, but just to say where I am, I think we ended up in a good place with the three-part test. And to Councilmember Albanaz's point, and I know this is a big concern, I think most of these in the smaller lots are going to be 800 or smaller, as Councilmember Friedson said. But I think when we thought about it, we didn't want to have a general rule that couldn't apply based on the lot size. And we know we have many different sizes within different zones. So I do think this is the appropriate way to limit it. And actually, we've heard, as was mentioned, some people think it's too stringent. And so I think here you're going to allow a happy medium and have a compromise. So I would not be in favor of changing from what the committee did either, but appreciate the amendment.
Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to clarify that the amendment, the change, is for a limit of 800 for R60 and R90. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Well, so it's an interesting conversation because you can't even build an 800 square foot ADU in an R60. So that point is moot. It's limited to 600 square feet, 10% of
lot sizes vary.
Well,
Lot sizes vary. They're cut differently within different neighborhoods.
so then what is the likelihood of within an R60 there being an 800 square foot ADU?
We know the average lot size.
Yeah, in R60, the average lot size across the county is 8,000 square feet. This here is a histogram that shows the distribution of R60 lots across the county. So you can see
We're not seeing anything.
there you go. Now you see it.
So these are all
Technology natives.
We're always learning new tricks here on the council.
Did you try the power button?
So what percentage are we then talking about? Someone who has faster arithmetic, a faster math mind than I?
I'll have to whip out the iPhone calculator here.
Handy calculator.
I used to know this.
iPhone has a calculator?
Yeah.
While you're calculating this, I just want to point out, though, that there's also the 50% test and of this as well. And so it's a much higher percentage because a lot of these older lots have smaller houses on them for the principal structure. And so that would restrict it as well. So I think it's just important that this math is just this one test. And there's other tests, too.
Sure. And I understand that. And that's why I'm just trying to determine what would actually be done, how detrimental this is to the goal that the committee has stated. And until I get some numbers, I'm not quite, I think it's moot, quite frankly. I think it's a wash, at least within the R60s. The R90 might be a different story, but I would like to understand the math a little bit more. And I appreciate the diagrams that the department has presented. We'll talk about that next, and thank you for fulfilling that request from last conversation.
Well, it's a little bit more. Okay, so 64% of the lots in R60 across the county are 8,000 square feet or less.
Okay. So this wouldn't
64%.
change for 2/3. Okay. Do we have those numbers for R90? You knew that was coming.
I knew it. I said, click over there.
It's a lot more math. I'll yield to someone if they want to engage or.
Yeah, it's almost
Fill
all
the
of them in
time.
R90, it looks
Okay.
like. No, because, no, a little less than half for 6,000, okay, 9,000. So we don't know what share might be 6,000 or 7,000, but you can see that over half, at least, maybe 80% are bigger than 9,000 square feet. So this would limit 80% or more of the lots in the R90 to 800 when, if they were to get through the three-part test, they might be able to go to 900 feet or 1,000 feet. And it would limit 35% of the lots in R60 to 800 when some of them might get to be a bigger structure through the three-part test.
That's correct.
We don't know how many.
So if I could just reclaim. So given that math, I'm personally comfortable with that change for the R60, but given the dynamics with the R90, I think it just changes that whole dynamic, and I wouldn't be supportive of that. And I don't know if you want to revise your proposal, but that's just where I stand.
Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much, Madam President. A townhome, first off, these could be 2 stories. So it's the footprint, if you do 2 stories, you can get to 800. And a town, so that would mean the first floor footprint would be 400 square feet if it were 800. And a townhouse is usually about 20 by 20. What is a townhouse now, 22 by 22?
20 by 20. That's close
So
enough.
that's 400 square feet on a first floor. I mean, on the footprint itself. So this would be about the size of a town. Gwen is coming in with an update. Okay.
I'm sorry, just a point of clarification. Director Wright just said that townhouses are more likely 20 by 50 or 20 by 45 feet.
Really?
Footprint. Because they're usually not square, they're usually rectangular in shape, they tend to be 20 feet wide
I
and
don't know that I,
twice as long, but.
well, it depends on if they're 2 or 3 stories, but go ahead.
Here, why don't you sit down?
Yeah, an average townhouse is maybe a total gross floor area of around 2,000 square feet. So each floor, assuming it's a 2.5 story, would be about 1,000 square feet, which is 20 by 50. But, I think that a garage, a 2-car garage, is 20 by 20.
Right.
But a townhouse has a bigger footprint than the 2-car garage.
Well, actually, my experience has been a little different. Most of the townhomes that I know, of course, they count the gross floor area from the basement as well in many cases, and that the townhome itself is not 50 feet deep. I mean, the lot isn't 50 feet deep in some cases, but
I think some of them may be 20 by 40, but generally they're bigger than a 2-car garage.
Well, and I mean, to the point, though, that if it were, this could be about the size or similar size to, if it were 20 by 20 to a townhome or whatever. I think that in order to, and I understand the concerns on all sides, if it would be a friendly amendment, I would say that whether it could be only no larger than 1,000. If most of these aren't going to be 1,200, why would we put 1,200 in there to have neighbors be concerned about these? I think if we went to no more than 1,000, then this would take care of a lot of concerns that neighbors might have on it. So if there's a second, I would issue amend that for a friendly amendment to be 1,000 square feet rather than 800.
Okay, hearing no second. Councilmember Friedson.
Yeah, I just want to clarify again. We made the clarification before, not for gross floor area to be the acting part of this test, but for footprint. So the point that was being made before, it doesn't matter how many stories the principal structure is. It's the footprint of this. It is an extremely strict test. You'd have to have a massive house on 2 or 3 stories that isn't a rambler, isn't a 1-story structure. You'd have to have a massive house in order to have an accessory structure that's 50% that is greater than 800 square feet. I mean, we talked about townhouses 20 by 50 or 20 by 40, but a principal structure, there aren't very many houses in an R60 or R90 zone that have a footprint that is 2,400 square feet. That would be like a 4,000 to 5,000 square foot house. That is a massive, massive house. And so, I think, and that house that size in an R60 zone still couldn't take up 35% of the lot coverage. And so I think the magic to the amendment is that it has 3 tests that hit 3 different areas to make sure that it can expand and contract based on the size of the lot, not the zone, which is pretty variable, and that is extremely restrictive, in terms of size to maintain the accessory nature and to make sure that it is compatible from a size standpoint. And so I just wanted to make sure we started talking about gross floor area. We're talking about footprint here, and you'd have to be talking about a massive house on a very small lot and almost in an impossible math in order to get 35%, 10%, and 50% of the principal structure and somehow be above 800 square feet.
Right, I think that's what's so important to, that you clarify this again, because that three-part test is proportional, and that's what we're looking for, because it is going to be very difficult to just, go by just zone. This, I think, was very well thought out in terms of it being proportional and therefore respecting the character of the neighborhood, which is why I am, supportive of the committee's recommendation, because I think it was very well thought through. Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you. Appreciate the clarifications and the thoughtful, again, conversation. So I live in Kensington, and there are unusual lot sizes within our community, and there are anomalies. And while it admittedly is a small percentage within our 60 and a higher percentage within our 90, but still smaller relative to the overall zone, if you happen to live, and I will tell you that many of the teardowns and the buildups of the homes in our community are massive homes that are taking up large parcels of these lots. And if you happen to have one of those anomaly properties that has built tear down and build up of an already very large property that is dwarfing the residents next to it, and then in addition to that, if you potentially add another 1,200 square foot structure in addition to a large house, while it's a small percentage of the population, the person individually that it impacts, I think is going to have an issue. And so that's why I just sort of felt that a cap of 800 felt a little bit more comfortable for me, but hearing some of the conversation of my colleagues, I would be willing very much to amend my amendment to focus on 1,000 in the R90 zone to sort of address two of the proposals that have been put forward by my colleagues and acknowledging the will of the council, but also trying to find some sweet spot and happy medium for those residents that will be disproportionately impacted because of the anomalies that exist within communities and are very real.
Thank you. I guess I was thinking that, even if you went ahead and built a much larger home, because it is a three-part test, it would be very rare for you to then have enough lot to be able to then build a 1,200, accessory unit, because you've already pretty much utilized quite a bit of the lot. So that's why the three-part test for me it felt like it covered all of those possible scenarios. Anyway, Councilmember Rice.
Yeah, so again, I've been very open about my wife and I searching for a home and looking at what we would do in terms of trying to accommodate my mother who's going to be moving in with us. And so when I look at this and I think to myself, looking at a 5-bedroom house, and this is a real-world example, so I'm using a real-world example here, folks. 5,000 square foot home on a quarter-acre lot, so that's roughly about 10,800 square feet. I've already exceeded the 35%. I can't build anything on that lot. Even though there's space, I can't build anything because I've already exceeded the 35%. You'd have to have a much smaller home to be able to accommodate, and then to assume that those particular anomalies would be the ones that would move forward with something like that is even more of an anomaly. And so I really think that, we're searching for something that is the incredible rarity that isn't most likely going to happen. I mean, in a case like this, you're really looking at something in which if we were looking at a much smaller home and then saying that we would be able to build, I mean, you'd be looking at on a quarter-acre lot, so roughly about 10,000 square feet, we'd have to have a 3,500 square foot home, and that still is at the maximum. And then wouldn't allow for you to build anything else. So I'd now be looking at like a 2,500 square foot home to then be able to have an ADU on it. And then you start building all these things to where it's not likely to happen. And so unless you have a really large lot size to where you can actually have this initial structure and then build this ADU, and I understand my mother lives in Kensington, so I know all too well about the character and some of the lot sizes in Kensington. You're right, they're very unique and some are, but again, the likelihood of these things happening, folks, is just very small. From a person who's looking at this right now, who's doing this in Germantown, in a place where we have larger lot sizes than we have in Kensington. And I can tell you, it's just not likely to happen. So from that perspective, while I appreciate and understand the spirit of where the council member is going with trying to assure and give assurances and to the public, these things aren't happening anyway because it's just not practical. And as a person who's looking at it right now, those are few and far between as far as examples go. And with the three-part test, you've really pretty much checked all the boxes and made it really difficult for folks to be able to move forward with that limitation. So I support the original language.
Okay, great. So we do have an amendment before us to limit the maximum size of a detached ADU to 800 square feet. All those in favor, please raise your hand. That'll be Councilman Albornoz, Katz, and Glass. All those opposed, please raise your hand. That'll be Rice, Friedson, Navarro, Reamer, Hucker, and Jawando. So it does not pass. Okay, next item.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that thoughtful suggestion. I think there was a lot of recognition of the issue you raised, Councilmember Albornoz, but we felt like the tests that we had established addressed that. What are the height limits for detached accessory apartments? That was an issue that we took up, number 2 on top of page 6, and there was a request for some illustrations. So we are here now to see some illustrations.
Yeah, correct. This isn't about making a change. This really was in that conversation of how compatible is this? You know, what are the parameters? You requested planning staff to bring illustrations of accessory structures with different heights in the different zones, R200, R90, R60, so you could get a feel for what that might look like. So they're here to present that. Thank you.
Sure. What you're looking at now, these are 3 examples from in the R60 zone. We tried to create examples that were the most restrictive possible. So these are all assuming 6,000 square foot lots in the R60. I would note that even based on the decision you made earlier regarding the setbacks and the length of the structures, some of these numbers have changed already and are even more restrictive, and so what you're looking at may not necessarily be possible now. But to get to the height piece, if you look at example C here, this is an ADU that would maximize the height allowed for an accessory structure, which is 20 feet. When you go up to 20 feet, it requires additional setback beyond what would otherwise be required. In this case, it expands it to 15. And this is a house that is the maximum height as well. In this entire case, this maximizes, well, this doesn't maximize the lot coverage. These 2 other ones do, because when we go 2 stories, we now need to shrink the footprint of that townhouse, I'm sorry, of the ADU in half. So this is a 300 square foot footprint on 2 stories. I also have this for R90.
And what you need to shrink that footprint because
the maximum size of the ADU would be 600 square feet. So to make it 2 stories, we did 300 and 300.
Right. You're still subject to the maximum size cap. So there's.
So in all 3 cases, these are 600 square foot.
So this is okay. So these are 6,000 square foot lots.
Right.
600 foot ADUs.
Yep.
And these are 3 different ways that a homeowner could build them. At least, when you say that this has already changed, is this because of the footprint versus volume?
What we tried to do was create one that had all lengths were less than 32 feet, because that was the restriction we were working with previously. And then one where the length was longer than 32 feet, and then one where the height went up to the maximum 20 feet.
So B is no longer really viable because we don't allow them to be that.
Correct. And well, you would allow it, but there's an additional setback for everything beyond 24 feet now.
Right.
Right. And yeah. And in fact, even A changes, because A, we had created this as 30 by 20. So since 30 is greater than 24. Yeah. So.
Okay.
So this is the one that's most applicable now, is the one with the full height. And same thing in R90.
Councilmember Glaze, did you?
Okay. So in R90, we were dealing with the same height restrictions on the principal dwelling, 35 feet, and 20 feet on the accessory dwelling unit.
And can I ask, why did you choose the 1,800 square foot footprint? Is that a typical size or on the main structure?
No, again, we were trying to maximize the lot coverage. In this case, in R90, it's 30% lot coverage.
I see.
So we, knowing that it was 9,000 square foot lot, we went with an ADU
So
that
this is
would be
the worst-
900 square feet. So to maximize, the house itself had to have a footprint of 1,800.
Okay.
So, yeah.
This is the max.
Right. So again, here, this is the 20-foot high ADU.
All right.
And then we also did it for the R200. In R200, we're dealing with slightly different height restrictions. The principal dwelling can be 40, or actually, I believe even more, depending on certain circumstances. The accessory structure is limited to 35 feet in height, and so we continued to use the 15 feet, which we use as the examples in the other ones that were single-story. And then for the two-story, we maximized the height at 35 feet.
Councilmember Glass.
Thank you for the illustrations. When I asked for them at the last session, I knew that they'd be helpful in visualizing, and your preface that some of these are already moot based on the conversation show the dynamics at play. And so my question is this: if these structures, any of them, were attached to the house, could the homeowner build them at right?
Yes.
Okay. So simply detaching them, this bill would allow the homeowner to do what the homeowner could already do if they wanted to expand their family, have their in-laws, have more children, whatever the family dynamics might be.
Or create these as additions as ADUs.
As attached.
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
In fact, I think they could probably be a little bigger as an addition under many cases than they could as an ADU.
Certainly, with the when you go up to 2 stories and the footprint is smaller, you could expand that footprint to still hit the maximum footprint.
Right. So, all right. So those are the illustrations.
All right.
Nothing. This is observational.
Yep. And we want to thank planning staff. It was, even though not a lot of pages, this was a lot of hours of work,
Yeah.
and they did this diligently over the last week. So I would like to thank them for that.
Appreciate you.
Very hardworking. Okay, so we're on to issue number 3, which was, should the minimum 1-acre lot size for a detached ADU be deleted? And the council had requested information on how many properties in the small lot zones are 1 acre or greater in size. And so there's a chart for you.
This is so great. So the current law, if we don't change the code, you can't do a detached structure unless you have an acre in the R60 and R90.
Well, actually, R60, R90, R200, you can't do it at all. But when you can do it, you have to have a minimum of 1 acre.
Sorry, you can't even do it at all in the R60 and R90. Which is funny because we hear a lot from advocates, oh, they're already allowed. You know, they're already, no.
Only attached.
Only attached. But if you didn't allow, if you kept that one, there's only 320 lots in all of the R60 and R90 that are an acre or more.
Correct.
That's pretty astounding.
Yeah.
And then there's 2,500 of them in the R200.
Right. So that was just, again, bringing back information for the council. Council also requested information about requiring a fence for newly constructed detached accessory dwelling units. And there is screening required in the zoning code for conditional uses in residential zones. But there's not, but currently, in particular, the fence and screening has been particularly called out and not required for certain conditional uses, such as a home health practitioner or a home occupation. When screening is required, there are standards for that screening. It requires it to be an additional 50% in length in each direction or to the end of the lot line to make sure that there's appropriate enough screening when you're screening some use in particular, which could be the newly constructed ADU. Something to consider.
Can we have?
All right.
Councilmember Albornoz.
Okay, so I referenced in our last work session the fence that my family has, which has been a game changer. We are a loud family. We have 4 kids under the age of 11. We're constantly, kicking balls around in the backyard, and my kids are amazing, but they're kids, and so we put up a 6-foot fence between our property and our neighbors, whom we love and who are dear people. But more for us than for them. But it has been a game changer in terms of helping to assure just privacy on both sides. And so I have personally really positive experiences with fencing. And I think among the many concerns that have been issued is the intrusion of privacy and just the general intrusion by the detached units in particular that I am very sensitive to, because while I think we've done a good job of doing our best within reason to limit their size and scope, they are going to be an infringement on the neighbors around. And so I don't think it's unreasonable for detached units, particularly within R60 and R90 zones, to require that a fence be put up in between the property lines of where the ADU is the most adjacent to the neighbor that they're going to be moving into. I, once again, want to publicly appreciate the efforts of the Fed Committee to address some of the privacy concerns by ensuring that there be no windows on the side of the adjacent property, or that the entrance be on the other side. But I think this would be one additional and I believe reasonable step to help prevent the potential of neighbor versus neighbor conflict, which is among the worst conflicts you can have. I've had it in the past. I'm sure you guys have as well. And I think this is a preemptive and reasonable measure to potentially address some of that conflict and head it off at the pass. And so for R60 and R90, I'd like to move that there be a requirement of a 6-foot fence on the property line that the neighbor would be adjacent to.
Okay, so it's been seconded by Councilmember Rice, was it? Okay, great. Councilmember Reamer.
All right, I totally get where this is coming from. I really do. I second your comments about the need to recognize the impact of your family or a family on the neighbors. This is probably the appropriate time to quote the Robert Frost poem with the famous phrase, "Good fences make good neighbors." But I think in this case, I'm worried that there could be as many negative unintended consequences here as positive ones. The reality is your neighbor has the right to put a lot on their line anytime they want to. And I'm concerned that this requirement may result in fences going up where people don't want a fence. And it could be that you have a kind of an open feel to your lots, and that's the way you like it, and then you convert a garage, and now you have to put up a fence, and your neighbor is unhappy about that. I think it could go either way, and I think as the law is, of course, your neighbor at any time can build a fence. So, I hear what you're saying. I think that the right of your neighbor to build a fence is the kind of backstop protection. And of course, if you're in a dialogue with your neighbor and you're saying, listen, I want you to know I'm going to be converting this garage, or I'm going to be adding an ADU to the yard, the neighbor might say, well, I think you should put up a fence. And then hopefully you do it as a good neighbor. And if you are not a good neighbor, then your neighbor at least has the right to put one up themselves. I feel like that is sufficient, and I just worry about creating, a kind of moment where your neighbor says, I didn't want a fence, and you've added a unit, and you've ruined my view shed with this fence. I don't like it. So that's why I just don't recommend this.
Okay, Councilmember Friedson.
I just had a couple clarifying questions. One, is the amendment for just newly constructed structure? I mean, you mentioned an accessory unit being built over a garage. I just wanted to...
Newly constructed.
Newly constructed, okay. I just want to clarify that. And then could staff... We had an extensive conversation about this, and I am sensitive to the privacy issue. We arrived at a different outcome at the committee. We did discuss fences. We, talked about the windows of existing structures, facing inward and not new windows being created that are within the current setbacks as long as they were legally constructed. And that's where we arrived at. We decided to move away from the fence for a number of reasons. But one of the reasons was the aesthetic and the type of fence. Could we get some clarification from staff on if we have a fence requirement, what does that mean? Could that be a chain link fence? Does that have to be a beautiful white picket fence? Could it be a green colored or magenta colored fence? I mean,
There are no requirements at this time. I mean, you want to have chain link, board on board, any type of fence. You come in and you're allowed up to 6 foot 6 inches.
so my concern is, while I think the fence and having a nicely constructed fence, does make for a good neighbor at times, I don't know how we make sure that the fence is nice and improves the situation, and so I have some concerns there, unless there's a way to clarify that. So thanks for the clarification.
There is nothing in the zoning book in regard to the aesthetic of the fence, so the requirement is the height of it.
Right.
As long as it's below 6.5 feet, it's allowed.
Councilmember Joando.
Thank you, Council President. And thank you, Councilmember Albanaz. I understand where you're coming from here, and I just looked at 2 holes in my fence today, so two planks that are out that I need to get prepared. Home Depot, here I come. But I think we struck a good balance again in the committee. One of the concerns here, we've already made a lot of constraints on the size, and we talked about earlier a lot in committee that one of the reasons there aren't going to be a lot of these done overnight is because they're expensive to do. And the fact that, if you're $150,000, $200,000 to build one of these, to draw the water and sewer if it's detached, and do all the things you're going to need to do. And one of my main concerns, and one of the reasons I'm in favor of the overall proposal, is because I think the vast majority of these ADUs are going to be attached basement units. And that's where you're going to get the deepest affordability. But if we're going to have any remote chance of affordability in the detached units, adding another requirement to put a fence around, in addition to Councilmember Reamer's point that I think you're right, there might be people that don't want a fence, and requiring it doesn't leave an option. I think you're going to add another set of cost that could be prohibitive, particularly for people that might want to do this. So I think that's another reason that why I can't support this amendment, but understand and am supportive of the windows. I hope people are good neighbors, but I don't think it would be a good policy to mandate that everyone has to do it.
Okay, Councilmember Rice.
So Councilmember Friedson has actually concerned me a bit when it comes to his questioning about the type of fencing. And so is there a way for us to structure this such that it would require, because a chain link fence is actually worse, I mean, in my eyes, than having it doesn't do anything for sound, and it gives a much more negative appearance from that perspective. I know I wouldn't want, my neighbors put up a chain link fence. It has a certain, So
I'll direct this to DPS. If you're going to add a standard that requires the fence, perhaps you could add the requirement that a fence that provides privacy. And if it has the word privacy, then maybe DPS then, when they approve that, makes the determination that obviously the chain link fence is too bare and wouldn't do that. But if that's the concern for the provision, if you add the words, a fence to provide privacy is required, 6-foot fence to provide privacy, but I'll let them talk.
DPS?
No, I concur. I mean, as long as if that's the wish of the council,
right.
You approve something, that any new ADU, detached ADU, they must have a fence and they have to be screened so you're not able to see through it. We can ensure that's done.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Albornoz.
So I guess to Councilmember Reamer's point, I'm sensitive to that. It's true. There may be some people who don't want the fence, and so I'm not sure if language could be added or whether that would too complicate or make it legally not viable. But if the neighbor wanted to that was going to be impacted by the ADU that is part of the adjacent property, who I am trying to provide some additional support for. If they don't want the fence, could we add language to allow them to exempt?
Yes, you could. I mean, however you guys want it, or you could have, other types of screening, if it's trees or other measures. I mean, that's something you want to look at it.
But instead of opting out, isn't there a way to include a provision like when you want to do, let's say, speed bumps or something, there is a process by which you have to get a particular amount of signatures? Couldn't there be, instead of just opting out, couldn't there be a process where you're going to do this, you go to your neighbor, and then you say, hey, I am going to build this ADU, and there is this provision, do you mind, yes or no? And there's a yes, it's okay. And so then it's like, all right.
Yeah,
you know what I'm
that
saying?
would be right. That would be the case that we could require. You have to have a signature.
Of the
You
person,
have
the neighbor.
approval from your adjacent property.
Right, saying that it's
And
all
you
right.
bring that before we issue the fence
On the,
permit.
right, on the side where the
Right.
fence.
And this is what we do
First-
currently. If it's right on the property line, we want them to bring something from their neighbor
Right.
to show they're fine with it.
Well, then, yes.
To build it. I think that instead of saying, I think being proactive and saying, getting a signature and an authorization or an agreement from the neighbor that's you're going to be abutting that says it's okay, because what if they don't want to have that block, like you were saying, right? So instead of just automatically doing it, first consult with your neighbor, say, hey, I'm going to build an ADU. Here's this one requirement, that I can build a fence if that provides more privacy for you, et cetera. Do you mind? Yes or no? No, I don't mind. I think it's great. Okay, cool. Then you don't have to build a fence. But if they're like, yeah, I think I need something, whatever, then have them authorize it, instead of moving forward, like we do for speed bumps or for sidewalks and things of that nature. There are requirements before you move forward.
Absolutely. So we need some kind of letter or agreement from your next door neighbor that, hey, I'm fine
it's
with the
fine.
fence going up. Right.
Okay. There would be a couple of important provisions to this I could think of. First of all, if there is an existing fence, then the owner's not required. So it can't be a case where the next door neighbor retaliates and makes you build a new fence, even though there's one there. And to be clear that it's only the neighbor adjacent, it's only that one property line. That is it the abutting property? What would be the word for that lot? But it's not all three neighbors who must.
Well, it could be.
And is it all the way down the lot line? Like if you have a lot that's 80 feet deep, and the ADU is behind the house, it's already got a substantial front yard. Do you really want a fence that goes all the way to the street? That can't be.
This is where it gets a little sticky.
50% of the side wall of the accessory dwelling. Is that what we're talking about? I don't understand the 50% limitation.
Where is the 50% limitation?
For the size. 50% of the length of use, right? So the ADU is.
So if the ADU is
and your mic is in
30 feet deep, then it has to be. If the ADU is 30 feet deep, it has to be 15 feet on either side. Is that what you're saying?
It's 45 feet length.
45, yeah.
Fence has to be.
Right. Past the ADU.
150% of the unit. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
The length of the fence is 150% of the unit as a mandate?
Well, that's currently how screening in the code has been set up for other uses where screening is required. You could do something different here, but the more complicated this gets, I think it gets to be harder to.
This seems to me to be just administratively hinky. That's not a legal term, but you know what I'm
You said hinky, not kinky.
No,
you said
not
hinky.
Hinky.
I didn't say what you said.
In the case of conditional uses like daycare centers and things like that, sometimes the hearing examiner will impose requirements like landscaping. Like I say, there has to be a hedge or some trees planted to screen the property. And it just seems to me that this is I'm not suggesting that's the direction you should go, but it just seems to me like that this is going to be difficult to administer, and and even if you provide an opt-out for the neighbor, it seems to be like a little bit of a one solution for privacy and screening to fit every property, and you can envision a lot of different permutations of what would be desirable. I acknowledge that it's a lot to ask to put this on the neighbor, but I think what Councilmember Reamer said earlier about the neighbor not only has the option to build a fence, and maybe they say, well, why should I have to pay for a fence? But they also have the option of putting up a hedge or plantings on the lot line. It just seems to me that
That's on the neighbor, right? That's not
that could
on
be
the
right,
person.
and that's not I don't think that's maybe as burdensome as it sounds to put that on them, because they're the ones that have presumably the aesthetic concern of having to look at the accessory dwelling. And the last thing I'll say, and then I'll be quiet, is again, you could with a tear down scenario, we're already talking about more restrictive square footage and setbacks than would be required for a tear down. So, but somebody could put a McMansion next to you with the minimal setback, and you're not required to build a fence.
All right, lots of points.
Yeah.
Somebody was going to add something?
All right.
Okay.
I think can you describe once again what is before the council?
Well, we still have some.
We have some clarification.
Councilmember Friedson.
Yeah, well, I appreciate Chairman Anderson mentioning what he did. Our focus on the committee was on existing structures inside the setback, and how do we address that, which is a difficult concern. This is a broader issue in that we run into the issue of you would have to make a choice to put up plantings or a fence if your next door neighbor sold their house and it got knocked down and rebuilt, and instead of a one-story rambler, they built a 3-story, 35-foot structure, which would be much bigger and much closer in terms of the height to your property than what we're talking about here. And so given the added expense and the fact that we would be adding a significant additional burden for somebody who wanted to build an ADU, I don't think that it is the best approach to what is a legitimate issue on privacy. I do have a clarification, though. If I appreciate the clarification on the chain link fence. If you add privacy to the standard, then that would eliminate something that you could see through. What happens if, first of all, the accessory structure can't be 6 feet tall. So if you have a fence that's 6 feet tall and the accessory structure is 8 feet tall, which is a standard, or 10 feet tall, which would be the standard, would that satisfy the privacy concern? One, and two, and on top of that, the second story, if this is above a garage or an existing shed or an existing accessory structure, the fence would literally do nothing for privacy. So how would we satisfy, given the updated language, the privacy issue if the 6-foot fence literally would do nothing for a second story structure?
Well, I think because the council member made the motion that it is a 6-foot tall fence, that holds. The addition of the term for privacy is really about how much you can see through that 6-foot tall fence. It doesn't change the height of the fence. The fence is 6 feet tall.
So the privacy would be, the fence would offer privacy, but not for the structure that's requiring to have the privacy from? But
right.
The one level isn't the ADU, is the point that I'm making. It's the one level is the garage that doesn't require. Yeah, according to permitting, I just want to clarify, this is important. According to our previous discussions, building a second story on an existing structure is, by our definition, a new structure, and would be treated as a new structure. So you would have to abide by all of the setback requirements. It wouldn't be grandfathered in effectively. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay. So it is different. I just point out that the idea of, this is where we hit the hang up in the committee, that while well intended, the fence doesn't really solve all, or I think even most of the issues and concerns, and adds a massive cost. Fences are extremely expensive, thousands and thousands of dollars, if we're not talking about a chain link fence, with all of us agree don't. So for that reason, I have some concerns.
Councilmember Glass.
good conversation. And so, again, I keep coming back to the diagrams because I think it's important to note what can be built by right on one's property, and to build any of these structures, and as the chair of the committee noted, structures that can be even built bigger than this, there's no requirement for a fence. But regarding the privacy, and this is where my mind is at, I understand the desire to require the fences. But isn't that why also there have the amendment limits the windows and outward exposure for the surrounding community, so that you're not peering into someone's accessory dwelling. They're not staring at you likewise. And to throw this out there, if the will of the council was to move forward with some fencing provision, I would ask that we change those dynamics regarding the windows or some of the other outward facing aspects of an accessory dwelling, so that you could have more light. Because if the whole reason was not to have windows so that you limit the privacy, but then that is being limited by a fence, then let's make the structure the best it can be and have more light and more openness. And so I'm just throwing that out. I don't know where the will of the council is, but if it is to move forward with a fence component, I would ask that we revisit that secondary aspect as well.
Okay, Councilmember Rice.
So this is tough, and so I again, as not a member of Fed, who hasn't had this conversation before, I get the challenges that you faced in terms of coming up with that sweet spot, and this is a really difficult one. To Chair Anderson, I actually like what you said in combination with what the council president said, in that, you know, we do, and I remember quite vividly when we approved some plans for certain areas that we made requirements that we had screening via landscaping, whatever the case may be, to ensure that it didn't have an impact on the existing homes that were there. I remember Chevy Chase Lakes and others. I remember having these conversations about berms and all kinds of things that were, you know, so this isn't foreign to us in terms of what it is that we're looking to do here. So let me just be very clear about that. Let me also be very clear that what Council Member or Council President Navarro talked about is something that many of us throughout the county deal with all the time. I could not build my deck until I got approval from my neighbor. My neighbor had to approve the fact, because our houses are close to each other, and I had to have him sign off, and he and his wife signed off on the fact of allowing us to build our deck on our property. And I know that's HOA, I understand, but it's still a restriction that we have. And so from that perspective, when the council president brought it up, I said, that's something that I'm very used to. So I'm not sure if we can flush this issue out right now in terms of all of the nuances that are there. I will say that, and I'd like to look at some of our code language that we put into some of our other plans that we passed, because we did give flexibility in terms of what that screening may look like, and required before folks move forward with development that they had to have certain types of screening that was there. And then if, you know, and then you could put in the caveat that the council president said that if you can have your neighbors sign off saying that they're not interested or don't want it or don't need it, then fine. And what something like that would look like that encompasses more than just a fence, because I do agree that trees may work, other shrubbery may work, all those kinds of things, a berm may work. I mean, all kinds of things may work depending on the landscaping of the lot. That may be enough in its own right, right? So there's so many different unique circumstances. I do think that one size fits all fence, 6 feet, may not be appropriate, but I would like to understand a little bit more about what language we've used before in some of our other plans, and maybe if something like that, along with a sign-off, may work better. And so that would just be for, you know, as the seconder to the motion, I would just suggest to the maker of the motion that maybe we try and, because again, I don't think we're going to get to that today, just based on a lot of us in terms of the conversation, maybe something that we come back to for that particular issue and see if maybe there's some language that's comfortable, and it may not be, and that's fine, where some folks are, but that would just be my suggestion, Madam President.
Okay, Councilman Albornoz, would you agree that perhaps we should just come back to this?
Yeah, in fact, that's what I was going to say. I think I'd also like to see what other jurisdictions with ADUs are doing on the privacy issue. And again, being new to this and not having had the same opportunity as my colleagues in the Fed committee, if there are best practices out there, if there's language that we may be able to borrow, I really appreciate all of my colleagues have acknowledged the intent and that we all want to do the best we can to minimize the infringement on the neighbors, because it's who has jurisdiction here? And I think it can be a little bit challenging. And again, potentially creates that neighbor versus neighbor issue that I'm very sensitive to because I have had experience with, and it can get pretty ugly pretty fast. So I would like to work with council staff and see if we can address the concerns that have been raised and potentially amend the amendment.
Okay, so without objection, colleagues, can we just go ahead and put a pin on this particular issue? There would be more conversation to see what the options might be so that we can make a informed decision on this particular amendment. Is that okay? Yep. All right, great. So let's move on because I want to do a time check as well. So let's move on to the next item.
Very good. Thank you. The next item, middle of page 7, relates to parking. And this is obviously one of the stickiest issues in the code here, and the committee had recommended that we not add additional parking requirements within 1 mile of a Metro or Purple Line station. Planning staff did some research. They cross-checked the MVA database against the ADU database and learned that that there are for every 3 ADUs, I believe is the statistic. Basically, there's another car within a mile, and outside of a mile, there's a slight increase in the number of cars, maybe every 3.5 ADUs, something like that. And actually, within a mile, in either case, the number of cars fits within the code requirement, which is 2 parking spaces per property. That's without making it any stricter. The existing requirement is typically 2 parking spaces per property, and the MVA databases show on average 1.9 vehicles there. So that was the committee recommendation, and it may be that there will be a motion to change that. We also looked at the MARC rail. Councilmember Rice mentioned the MARC rail issue, and council staff has had some exposition on that. It's helpful, and we'll hear perhaps from Councilmember Rice on those points.
Okay, great. Councilman Albornoz.
Thank you. And I know this was a hot topic of conversation, the parking situations, and I think part of the problem is every neighborhood in the county is so distinct. You've got some of the older, more established neighborhoods that have very narrow streets, often homes with no driveways. That certainly is the case within Kensington and in the town of Somerset, where my grandparents had their home. Parking was a huge issue among neighbors because there just wasn't enough of it to go around. And so I think exasperating that is of concern, and while I do believe we should encourage people to use mass transit more rigidly than they are now, I think alleviating the parking restrictions up to a mile may cause more problems than we're trying to solve. And so I would propose an amendment to restrict to half a mile rather than a mile, as is currently been proposed by the committee.
Okay, so there's been a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Councilmember Katz has seconded. Councilmember Joando.
Thank you, Council President. And thank you to the committee and Councilman Robernaz, again, to your thoughtful consideration. This was one where we went back and forth, and there was a proposal in committee original proposal from my colleague, Councilman Friedson, was to do half a mile. I suggested we go to a mile because I know many people that live 0.6, 0.7 miles away from a metro line or a bus that do walk, and when I did my transit challenge, I'm one of them, and I think adding that additional extra cost to build an additional spot didn't make a lot of sense, but I did go with the will, and I'm glad I want to thank staff for producing this information, just to be clear, which basically says there's no difference between in car registration and MVA registrations between a half mile, three-quarters of a mile, and a mile, which to me says that you don't have any difference. Some of those people still can make it to transit, and so that we should leave it at a mile. I'm actually feel even stronger about it. I didn't have this information at the time, but now I think it kind of confirms that you're not. There aren't more cars, because what you would suspect to see is if you got further out, there'd be more car registrations, but there aren't. So, I think we should stick with the committee recommendation. I know Councilmember Rice may mention Mark. I think that's a great suggestion as well. I did want to have staff, because again, I think this can get confusing for folks. Could you just explain the current requirements and what this committee recommendation how it would change it? Could you just explain what's currently required and how the 1 mile exemption would change as it relates to parking?
Right. So when you currently have an additional ADU on your property, you're required to provide a parking space for that ADU. What the committee has recommended is that if you live within a mile of a Metro Rail or Purple Line station, and it had been requested to be amended, the Mark Rail station, you would no longer be required to add that additional space for your property.
There still would be
There's
additional
still
space.
Right, that
You
additional.
still
Still have a parking requirement for your home.
Right.
A detached house
Those
has a two-car parking
Right.
requirement.
And that's what I wanted to be clear on, that this is not removing any spaces that are already required. This is just saying
Right.
you don't have to build the additional space
space
if
for
you're
the
within
ADU.
1 mile of transit. So I think for that reason, looking at the data and the fact that it was my proposal, I'm in favor of it, but certainly understand the desire to look at it. But I think this data makes it clear that many people can still utilize transit within these amounts. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate the comments by Councilmember Jawando talking about the data, because I keep coming back to that. I want to be as informed as possible about this conversation and about the changes that are being proposed. And that's why I keep coming back to the graphic designs, the illustrations of what could be built as opposed to what can already be built. And when it comes to the data related to parking, there is no noticeable difference between parking within 1 mile of the Metro or Purple Line, our transit nodes. And I understand that not all areas of the county are the same, but here they are the same in terms of proximity to mass transit, be it the Purple Line or Red Line, and that is the common denominator for this conversation. And if you are outside of that zone, this doesn't apply to you. And if we're willing to give up on this half mile, mile, or mile conversation, then I'm going to ask the T&E committee to reconvene a conversation with the Department of Transportation and say, let's just give up on ride-on flex. Let's give up on all these new technologies that we're encouraging and fostering about getting people back and forth to public transit, because that's the heart of what we're talking about. And the data shows that there is no difference in driving patterns within that mile proximity. And I said this at the first work session. I lived, when I first moved to Silver Spring, I lived about 0.7 miles from the Metro and chose to walk, and most of my neighbors did as well. And so I think this is a white flag if we move forward, saying that we give up on transit alternatives, that we're giving up on multimodal forms of transportation. And I'm going to stick with the recommendation that's currently being proposed, that's in the amendment.
Councilmember Friedson.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I in full candor, the half mile was my initial proposal. I actually live 0.6 miles from a metro station, so this is a little bit of an awkward situation for me personally. I walk to Metro frequently and view myself as walkable, but the half mile, is kind of the established walk shed, and that's why I proposed that. I think that my initial idea, I'm open to the question of is a half mile appropriate or a mile, but the importance to me is the idea that we shouldn't be legislating requirements that assume that everybody has a car, because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that if we require you to have parking for a car, we're baking that cost in and we're basically subsidizing that car. And so that type of legislative thought process completely undermines our goals of getting out of single occupancy car reliance. And so I, on this, somewhat yield to my colleagues on whether a half mile or a mile is most appropriate. I'm glad that we are addressing the parking situation, but being thoughtful and intentional about it and thinking about how we do this in a forward-looking way that actually reflects our broader interests and our broader values. And I appreciate the conversation on it.
Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you so much. Last point I'd make, requiring your neighbor to expand the pavement in their front yard is not necessarily desirable. As a person who lives on a block, I probably don't want my neighbor to add more driveway. I would rather they have yard and flowers and trees. And Councilmember Hucker was saying he actually just recently removed a piece of his driveway so that he could replace it with plants that would soak up rainwater. I think that this is one where, different goals are in tension here, but I just don't think it serves a strong purpose to mandate that people will have to pave over more of their property, and especially in light of the fact that, there isn't a huge difference in the number of cars that will be attributable to that property. And in fact, ironically, there's a little bit more of a vehicle use or take up anyway, ownership I should say, not necessarily vehicle miles used, but ownership within a half mile. So I really stand behind the 1 mile. Appreciate Councilmember Jawando for standing or hanging tough on that one, and I hope that we will follow his lead there and support the committee recommendation.
Councilmember Bernos.
Appreciate the thoughtful comments again. Obviously, the will is going in a different direction than my proposal here. I do think that for all of this, that we should be evaluating a year, 2 years from now to assess. We are assuming not very many of these will be built based on the economics, which I concur is probably accurate, but I still think that we should revisit these issues at a reasonable time, because parking is an ongoing challenge within neighborhoods. It is, and I am looking forward to the point where there are fewer cars on the road, and support very much all of the efforts of the county with regards to moving towards mass transit. My only intention here is through that transition that we are properly and reasonably addressing what is already a concern within some neighborhoods and disproportionately closer to metro stations. And so whether we can add provisions of parking requirements, this is obviously an issue that T&E would have to take up, but I yield to the will of my colleagues. I'm not going to follow my sword over this one, half a mile versus a mile, but I would like us for us to revisit this and reevaluate and assess at some point later on down the line to confirm that it is in fact not an issue even through this transition.
Okay. All right. So I think we're ready to vote. Do you have anything else you need to?
I was just going to clarify that this, like everything else, is going to be revisit, as we discussed last time. It's not part of the zoning text amendment because it's not zoning text, but it was part of the formal Fed recommendation that we do get briefed on this on a regular basis to assess the progress, because I think all of us, not just the Fed committee, but obviously through this robust discussion, share that view that we ought to be continuously looking at what the results of this change are and how it's actually being utilized in the real world.
All right, so those in favor of, I thought that was a separate issue, right? So those in favor of Councilmember Albornoz's amendment, please raise your hand. Councilmember Albornoz, Councilmember Katz, all those opposed? Glass, Joando, Hucker, Reamer, Navarro, Friedson, and Rice. Okay, it doesn't pass. All right, Councilmember Rice.
All right, so it's very interesting, and as we were having that discussion, I had an opportunity to pull up some information. So I've got hot information, and I want to read something. Liberty Mill Apartments that just was developed a little over a year ago, right across the street from the Germantown Mark rail station, says, from our spectacular amenities to our walkability to the Germantown Mark station, Liberty Mill offers our residents a luxurious and accessible residential experience unlike any other in Germantown. These are brand new apartments that are beautiful, that are marketed specifically to talk about connectivity to our Mark rail station. This is what we've encouraged folks to do. And so for us to neglect and say that we're not having Mark as a part of this is a big mistake. Now, I understand, and I read the packet about some of the other stations who don't necessarily have that now. It's not to say that they won't and that we don't want to encourage them to. And while I understand that some are unique and really don't have that ability, and I get that, at a minimum, we definitely need to have Germantown. And I will correct a couple things. You know, it says in the station area would not support the needs of someone without a car, grocery store, drugstore, dry cleaner. Grocery store, Giant, 0.8 miles. Drugstore, CVS, 0.3 miles. Dry cleaner, Zips that I use, 0.4 miles. The list goes on and on. We've got a post office that's less than a mile away. Everything that you need. Restaurants, you can go to DSW or Bed Bath & Beyond. They're all within a mile. And so from that perspective, there is, I would counter, pretty much everything within a mile of the Germantown Mark rail station. So it truly is TOD. I mean, I would argue that it rivals a lot of what you see, and, you know, it might not have the same magnitude in terms of height and scope as what you'd see in a downtown Silver Spring, but, I mean, there's DSW, and, you know, if you want some, you know, whatever it is that you need is there within that 1 mile radius. And so at least I would say for the Germantown Mark station, and so I'd like to move that we at least have the Germantown Mark rail station if we're not going to add in the others, and would certainly, you know, if other folks want to add in the others, I'm okay with it, but at least at minimum, the Germantown station. So that would be my motion.
Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Reamer. All right, Councilmember Reamer.
All right. Thank you again, Councilmember Rice, for raising this important point. You know, I mean, my concern is if we don't add in the other stations, and then 2 years from now we succeed in winning an expansion of service hours on Mark, then we're punting to the next council or a future council to have to grapple with one of the hardest pieces of this provision. And, you know, people may not really want to do that, and it could be one of those things that just lingers on, and year after year it remains in the code. I'm sympathetic to just exempting Mark Station generally, recognizing that, you know, service is not yet where we want it to be, but we're pushing as hard as we can. And, you know, if there's a delay of a few years, you know, that's one consequence. On the other hand, there could be a delay of many years the other direction as well. So I will venture to, I support the motion, a motion to extend it to Mark stations generally.
That's acceptable to you, Councilmember Rice? That's a friendly amendment. Councilmember Katz.
Thank you. First off, I think it should be noted that many of the Mark stations are in areas where are not covered by this anyhow. You have Gaithersburg, you have Rockville, you have Washington Grove. So I don't know that adding the extra MARC stations is really going to be that much of a game changer. I do believe for Germantown that it's a much bigger difference. And of course, the only thing that you also have to keep in mind is that MARC is not Metro. I mean, right now, and hopefully MARC will change, but MARC runs 7 times in the morning or whatever it does, and stays at Union Station, and then comes back 1 time at noon and goes back. So it's very different than Metro that, you know, that runs throughout the days. But I do believe that it's for we're only talking about ADUs, and I do believe that this is an opportunity to put MARC literally on the map, is that it is a mass transit that we should be considering. I have no problem with adding the others.
Okay. Councilmember Friedson.
I totally agree with Germantown. I totally agree with the interest in MARC, and I think we all share a goal of expanding MARC service to more hours. I am sensitive to some degree with some of the staff concerns. I think they raised some legitimate issues beyond Germantown. I'm wondering if there's a way to, if there's a compromise on service hours of transit, so that if MARC does expand, that it would include more than just Germantown, or if that overcomplicates it to the point where it... No more complicated than fences, by the way, but that notwithstanding, I'm willing to back off here. I'll yield to the chair for some...
So you would say something like any MARC station providing service?
3 or more times a day.
Is that Pam?
I mean, my guess is once MARC changes the service, it's going to change them for all the stations, and so that won't really be the deciding factor.
Most of the stations. It might not stop at every station like it does now. It doesn't stop at every
I think we're missing the point that I was making. So the point that I was making is to say Germantown and then have transit at a certain service level so that it accomplishes, to your point of realistically, people who live in a lot of these areas, because MARC unfortunately doesn't have the service levels that we would want it, do now have cars.
Right.
And so, I mean, that's what that's the issue that we're addressing. We all want it, and so I think there's a way to reflect that with the service hours at the other stations, exempting out MARC like we did with Tacoma Park. I don't think it's that complicated to do, but if there's not an interest in doing that, I'm happy to yield down. I'm trying to be a consensus builder here and come up with a compromise that reflects what I think is a legitimate issue that you've raised, but also is in keeping with the district council member's point about Germantown and the overarching goal about MARC.
If I could add, on service hours, you have to be sensitive to whether or not you're talking about service hours, the span of service hours, the number of hours during the day that it stops, or the frequency it stops, because it may be possible to add 1 or 2 trains in the next 5 or 6 years, or shorter term in the peak periods, southbound in the morning, northbound in the evening, to be able to provide any service in the off-peak or even more frequent service during the peak, particularly in the off-peak direction, will be many decades off, frankly. So you have to be just sensitive to how you want to define what the additional service is.
I don't see any of my colleagues jumping up and down to try to join me here, so I'm going to back off and just say thanks for the discussion. Appreciate you answering the question.
All right, Councilmember Katz.
Yeah, just to the other point, and candidly, if somebody is going to be building an ADU in Clarksburg or Boyd's, more than likely they're going to have to put in a parking space. I mean, they're not going to. I mean, because even if you're using MARC, you can't walk to Germantown Center from there. So I think adding MARC to this is not going to be a game changer, and I think it helps. And I think that if someone wants to build an ADU, they're going to build that ADU so they can actually lease it. So.
Okay, so we have a proposal, an amendment to exempt also the parking with all MARC stations. Is that correct? Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand. That is unanimous. Okay. Excellent. Now, what do we have left?
All right, I think that resolves the components of the ZTA amazingly, and by noon. You've run a tight ship, Council President Nancy Navarro. I think there may be some comments on a companion legislation. Councilmember Friedson, did you wish to just preview the companion legislation? We've resolved all the issues of the ZTA.
Yeah, so the committee is putting forward companion legislation, as mentioned before. It will deal with areas such as owner occupancy, as we discussed before, clarification to the HOU covenant standard. This is similar language that is in the short-term rental law. It already is the case, but there has been concern that it wasn't the case, and so this will be clarifying language, just like the previous council did on the short-term rental law. It will clarifying information to reflect this new ZTA on basement heights, what those basement heights would be, and the fourth, Pam, that I am.
Help you out there. I know that Mr. Zients was working on that, so he didn't relay it to me.
The three you have so far, I might be able.
So owner occupancy, I'm pulling up my notes here. Hold on, sorry, 1 second. Owner occupancy, HOA, basement heights, and name change. I'm sorry. The most obvious one. I apologize. I know I can't think of it because it seemed obvious, but the name change of accessory apartments to accessory dwelling units, which is necessary for that. And there was also.
And there was the primary resident could be in either the ADU.
Yeah, that's the owner. Sorry,
Yeah.
the owner occupancy change
that was the first one.
that we
Yeah.
talked about earlier. I apologize. And then there's also the community action teams that the council president mentioned as well. Will be the fifth item in that accompanying legislation. It is expected to be introduced next week and will be taken up shortly after. And the idea here, as was mentioned earlier, was that it would be tied together, and so the implementation of the ZTA would be tied directly to the implementation of the bill. Separate from this, but related to this broader issue, we introduced, as those who are here know, the waiver of the fees for those with qualified disabilities as well, which I think is an important one, but was less of an accompanying issue related to this bill and more of in keeping with one of the main areas of advocacy for accessory dwelling units, particularly the detached accessory dwelling units, was supporting those in our community with developmental challenges. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Friedson. Appreciate that. And I just want to also put a pin in. We've heard from many neighborhoods that have challenges with parking as it is. They don't have ADUs. They don't have legal ADUs. I don't think they really have many ADUs, but they have a lot of cars in the neighborhood. And not allowing ADUs isn't going to help solve that problem. So in good faith, I've been looking hard at what kind of solutions could we present. Councilmember Navarro has alluded to the task force, sorry, it's not task force.
Community action team.
The community action team initiative that she spearheaded, and a companion to that could be parking permit programs. We talked about that a little bit before. Open to trying to find solutions to those other challenges that exist that aren't really related. They're not because of ADUs, but since we're delving into these complicated topics, it's an opportunity to think through and perhaps make some other proposals. So the Fed committee or the committee of jurisdiction, can take up those additional issues as we go forward.
Councilor Jawanda has the light up.
Briefly, thank my committee. Looking forward to introducing the bill that will be, again, tied on the same timeline. One of the things we also discussed, which I'm interested in talking with my colleagues about, is this allowing a grace period or amnesty period for people to become compliant. That was a suggestion that was batted around. We haven't done anything on it yet, but I think where we're moving with the additional inspectors, with the residential program, and the multifamily program, as far as making sure people are in compliance, I think along with ADUs, obviously a low number of registered. We've all realized that there's probably some unregistered things going on. Can we signal that, hey, look, come and get in compliance, and we'll we'll make that easier for you. And what that means could mean different things in different places. But that's something I just wanted to signal that it could be a part of this mix. And I think, again, we all want to ensure that people are being compliant and also getting the benefits of this type of housing. So thank you very much.
All right. Okay, Councilmember Friedson also has his slide on. Councilmember Friedson?
I just wanted a clarification that I don't know that we got to today that we talked about last time about new units, the building of new units, and there was a question of how that would work and when in the process the permit would happen. I don't know if you're prepared to explain where that might be or if that needs to be discussed at a future time, but we did put a pin on it last time, and so I wanted to put a continued pin on it this time, that maybe we get something in writing, or if we get a report back before we vote on this, that might be appropriate.
I think Ms. Dunn and I were talking about this last time offline, and I think we were in agreement that the use is the issue, not the structure, and therefore you're not going to have a problem getting a building permit based on who is. I'm right. We're talking about the same issue.
Yes.
Yeah, you're not going to have an issue because the building permit allows you to build the structure. Whether or not you can occupy it with a particular use will depend on whether or not, under this proposal as it's drafted, you have the owner in one of the units. But that will not prevent you from getting a building permit. Follow? Because the occupancy permit will come later and it'll be based on who's occupying the unit at the time. And maybe DPS can elaborate, but I think I'm correct in making that distinction.
Well, I mean, we work with DHCA. I mean, we need the approval from DHCA for the ADU so they can go through the process.
But the point is, as I understood it, if you have a project where you're going to build an accessory unit behind your house.
I think what I'd like to suggest, because I do need to do a time check, could you guys get together?
I think the short answer is that there's not an issue.
And then if we can get that information, perhaps in a memo form or something by next week, that would be great.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Councilmember Reamer.
All right, well, that concludes the deliberation. I'll pass it back to Council President Navarro. Again, we'll be voting on the 26th, as she'll say, but I want to thank my colleagues, each of them. This is a very complex challenge, and everyone has done a remarkable job working through. So I want to thank you very much for your very thoughtful deliberations, and to all the community groups that have participated in this process. You've been heard, and I really appreciate everyone. So I think we can all say more on the 23rd, whatever the date is that we'll be voting, but I want to really express appreciation. Thank you.
All right. Well, I also want to thank all my colleagues and staff and community for participating in this process. We will be voting on the 23rd, and obviously, anything else that comes up, we're just going to vet it through staff, et cetera. But I think that we have pretty much worked through all the major issues, and we'll be able to wrap that up. So with that, we will adjourn and come back at 1:30 for public hearings. Thank you so much.
On these planes.
The reason I like this club is that I get a sense of community from being with my friends and my friends from school, showing them stuff I've done at the fair, and building planes and getting money from stuff I enter in the fair too.
Volunteers guide the 4-H program and include former 4-H members, parents, teachers, and others in the community who are screened and trained by 4-H staff.
We started in 4-H when my daughter was in kindergarten. It was something we'd kind of targeted much early on when she was younger, and we liked it because it was a family activity. I certainly enjoy getting the kids to be inspired about something that they hadn't seen before. And I enjoy that I get to